Biden backs Ukraine. The US President Joe Biden gives the green light for Ukraine to use American missiles inside Russia. Are we on the brink of World War III? And will Britain follow suit?
Teenager road risk. The World Health Organization warns that road accidents are the leading cause of death for teenagers. We'll hear from Ross Scott, a former electrician who was in a serious accident when he was 23.
I actually enjoyed my work, but now I'm no longer allowed to go back to work through health and safety because of all the injuries. The whole life is just not working and sitting about the house and you wonder what you're doing with yourself.
Lots to talk about today, especially Sir Keir Starmer on his 15th trip abroad since he became Prime Minister. I mean, is that just part and parcel of the job?
Do you know, when often Prime Ministers have been in power a long time, they increasingly spend more time abroad because they're feted, bright lights, and having established themselves here. But he's barely established himself here. I think it's extraordinary he's away so much. He spent the equivalent of apparently nearly 6 days in a private jet.
Really?
Yeah, since he became Prime Minister.
Wow.
Think about the Air Miles, Prime Minister. I thought we were worried about that. Remember that conference last week? They took 450 people to that ludicrous, pointless COP29 conference. What were the carbon footprints for that?
Well, it would be something if it was all lovely and rosy at home, but there's trouble at home, isn't there? With the farmers' protest tomorrow, between 10,000 and 40,000 people expected to descend on Westminster, and Sir Keir Starmer is going to be in Brazil.
Funny that.
Let us know what you think. GBNews.com/you'll say. Before we get into all of that, let's have a catch up with the news with Tatiana.
Andrew, Ellie, thank you very much and good morning. The top stories. Whilst Sir Keir Starmer says we need to double down on support for Ukraine, as President Joe Biden has given the green light to Kyiv to use US-supplied long-range missiles to strike inside Russia. The Prime Minister says Ukraine is top of his agenda at the G20 summit of world leaders and told reporters there's got to be full support as long as it takes. President Vladimir Putin has warned the West they would be playing with fire if they allowed Ukrainian forces to launch Western-supplied cruise and ballistic missiles at Russia, saying it could even trigger a global conflict. It seems a move by North Korea to send thousands of its troops to fight with Russia has changed US calculations and forced Joe Biden into making this decision. Shadow Secretary of State for Defence James Cartledge says the move is justified.
Invaded Ukraine, wholly unprovoked, illegal invasion, a dictatorship invading a democracy. So it's been the right thing to do to not be directly involved in Ukraine, but to support them in whatever way we can in terms of providing munitions. That's helped Ukraine to check their advance. But there's been a major development. We talk about escalation. Imagine how the Russians would feel if 10,000 NATO troops were now in Ukraine supporting them. The fact is 10,000 North Korean troops have been deployed into this battle. We understand from the US State Department they've been injected directly into the fight with Russia. That is a major strategic development, and I think in those circumstances this decision is justified.
Sir Keir Starmer says he intends to pursue a pragmatic relationship with China when he meets President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit, as world leaders meet in Brazil. The Prime Minister said the size of China's economy and its membership of the UN Security Council meant he wanted to have serious and pragmatic discussions with the Chinese leader during his time in Rio de Janeiro. Sir Keir Starmer is set to meet with the President of China in a bid to defrost relations with Beijing. It is the first time a British Premier has met him since 2018. Speaking to reporters on a plane bound for Brazil, Sir Keir said the UK and China were both global players, global powers, both permanent members of the Security Council and of the G20. And burglars raided the Windsor Castle estate while the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children reportedly slept nearby. The King and Queen were not in the residence. The Sun reported that the two men are said to have climbed a 6-foot fence at night and stolen farm vehicles during the raid last month. They used a stolen truck to break through a gate, said to be the nearest exit for the Prince, Princess and their children before targeting Shaw Farm, a working farm inside the estate. The pair remain at large. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More news from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Ellie Costello. What a treat. Who's in for Bev Turner.
Well, it's very nice to be here with you, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
Now, masked men attempted to raid Windsor Castle while Prince William, Princess Catherine and their children were asleep nearby.
Well, in fact, what they did, they got over a fence and broke into some farm buildings, which were just a few minutes from where William, Kate and the children were sleeping, and the Thames Valley Police have confirmed a burglary at the property, and it was in October.
So why are we only finding out about this now, if it happened in October?
Because it's on the front page of the Times, of the Sun. Windsor raiders, Will's kids slept. What worries me, though, Ellie, they haven't found anyone. This is a break-in at one of the most secure buildings in the whole of Britain, the Windsor Castle. Farm buildings, we know farmers are under huge pressure at the moment anyway because of the government. Still nobody, but we know from the Sun report, 2 masked men clambered over a 6-foot fence, drove off in a pickup and on a quad bike, which was stored in a barn. It's just quite extraordinary.
So stolen farm vehicles,
but
from the property very close to where
but actually on the Windsor Royal Estate. So let's talk to, because I thought they were meant to be armed police everywhere. Let's talk to the former head of Royal Protection, Di Davis, who joins us now. Di, if you were in charge of, still in charge of Royal Protection, would you be a little bit worried this morning reading that on the front page of the Sun? Good morning.
Well, I'd look at all the facts first, and I wouldn't entirely go on everything that whoever reported this back to the Sun. It happened in October. Clearly, questions need to be asked. But it is this particular barrier, from my recollection, is in the outer circumference. And again, each royal residence within that scope of security has, like onions, a huge range of different alarms, alerts, and all the rest of it. And they are permanently have officers attached to those residences. So as far as I was concerned, the royals themselves were not under any kind of threat. I think this was a theft, not dissimilar to thousands that occur, unfortunately, now for our farmer community. I mean, it seems to me they get robbed at every opportunity. But going back to this, no, I think careful analysis. This is a farm. It's years since I was there, but from recollection, it is an not independent, it's on the royal estate, but it is a farm. I'm surprised the alarms didn't go on, and if they did go off, then clearly officers would have responded. But it's a huge area, and you can't have officers patrolling 24/7 when you have so many royal residents to actually look after. And, you know, like everything these days, the police tell us they are stretched. But it's slightly misleading showing pictures of Windsor Castle and those surrounds. This is some miles away from the actual castle. And again, as I say, all the royal residents will have separate security. And I don't think at any time this caused them any concern. But clearly, you will look at it and see what else could be done to ensure this and everywhere else in the vicinity are secure.
And what is concerning about this, though, is as you say, it's not near Windsor Castle, it's near Adelaide Cottage, where we know the Waleses are living. But that's what's so concerning. My understanding is it's the same gate that the Prince of Wales is using, and Catherine and the children, the same gate that was used by these burglars in order to gain access. You'd think the security would be much tighter around that gate.
Well, again, there are several gates between the road and this particular venue, i.e. where they're living. So I'm not sure which one we're actually talking about. If we're talking one directly on the road, as it were, then this is a barrier. It's not such a gate, but I stand to be corrected because it may have changed since I was there. So again, I say there are several other factors that are involved in this. I don't know the circumstances, so it would be dangerous for me to speculate too much. What I do say, royal security is taken very seriously, and I've no doubt my colleagues will be looking at it to see if indeed such increase requires to be done. But I say again, security is like onions. You have layers and layers. Hopefully those layers are sufficient, but again, never say never, and again, look at this sensibly and practically.
Do you know what struck me, Di, reading it? I thought, well, they're just in the same boat as everybody else in this country. This break-in took place at least a month ago. Highly expensive equipment's been pinched, and no sign of any police breakthrough. And I'm not. This isn't a criticism of the police, Di. It's a mere reflection of the fact we don't have enough police. They're too overstretched, and crime is on the rise. And so, if even a royal farm can't get the intrusion on a royal farm, what hope for the rest of us?
Well, I agree. I live in Snowdonia in North Wales, and trust me, rural crime is out of sight up here. So, yes, I feel sorry for those involved, the farm manager and all the rest of it, but they're experiencing what my neighbours are experiencing in this part of the world. We've got to look again at how we deal with rural crime, but you're absolutely right. It perhaps illustrates that very little is done across a whole range of issues involving farmers. The poor things are being attacked on all fronts by the government and by others. So this just adds to their woes, and very little is done, and very little farm machinery is actually ever recovered. We've got to look at those behind it. I think 2 vehicles were stolen in this case. We've got to ask the question, what security was there? Whether it's a royal farm or any other farm, people need to be aware of their security, and I'm sure my colleagues will be looking yet again. I think it's a bit of an embarrassment rather than anything else.
But in terms of security of the royal family, I mean, this does need to be taken seriously, doesn't it? After the 2021 crossbow incident on Christmas Day, when that man crossed into Windsor Great Park with a loaded crossbow wanting to kill the Queen, and now this incident of 2 burglars, and they were only there to steal farm equipment. They weren't there, as far as I understand it, at least to cause the family any harm. But it's the accessibility that is very chilling in all of this.
Well, I understand where you're coming from, but I say again, this is a farm that stands alone, away from any secure, and I say again, secure royal residence. So that has to be taken. But no, I take it quite seriously, I can assure you. But again, I'd like to know more of the facts. Were there alarms? Were they switched on? So it seems to me there's a lot more inquiries before somebody like me can open my big mouth and make comments when I don't know all the facts.
Di, we've never thought you've got a big mouth, because what comes out of it is always just pearls of wisdom. It's always a joy to talk to you. That's Di Davis, the former head of Royal Protection. It is worrying because, as I say, the fact that they haven't got anybody yet, and yet they obviously know how they got in, they know how many were there, and if the royal farm haven't found anyone.
I know. Well, I'd be interested to know what the Wales family actually requires in terms of security, because they want the hands-off approach, don't they?
Yeah, they'll never tell you.
Obviously, they're not going to tell us, but they don't want even a nanny in the house at all times. They want to keep the household as normal as possible.
Yeah, which is admirable.
So it'd be interesting to see what kind of security they actually have.
I think we've got a statement, haven't we, from the police?
We do, yes. This is a statement from Thames Valley Police. They've said at around 11:45 p.m. on Sunday, October the 13th, we received a report of a burglary at a property on Crown Estate land near to the A308 in Windsor. Offenders entered a farm building and made off in a black Azuku pickup and a red quad bike. They then made off towards the Old Windsor Datchet area. No arrests have been made at this stage, and an investigation is ongoing.
Now, up next, farmers are flocking to Westminster tomorrow, protesting against the government's inheritance tax raid. It could seriously mean food shortages hit Britain. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
After the Hollywood ending that Wrexham Football Club have got, can Chorley FC benefit from a bit of the old celebrity magic dust?
I can't see why not. The guys have been down a few times now, and when they do come down, obviously they're bringing that with them. A little town like Chorley doesn't see much of the charts and big stars, so it's really nice to see them, and we always welcome them when they do come down.
And Mark, give us a flavour of the level of football. I understand you're in the National League North, right? That's 6 rungs down from the top flight. I mean, you're only just down the road from Manchester City, right? But I mean, give us a flavour of the 2 different worlds between your club and Man City.
Our players are all part-timers. So we've got kind of fitness coaches, we've got teachers, we've got all kinds of players who have full-time jobs alongside playing. Our average crowd is probably a tenth of what you get at Man City, probably even less than that. We get about 1,500 on a home game. The thing is, we know where we are and we understand where we are, and we are a real community club. Tonight, I'm ready now. I'm off to Marine, so off over to Merseyside. Playing the likes of Liverpool and Everton over on Merseyside would be kind of a dream come true. But we know where we are. We would just love to get to the Football League. So teams like Salford, Stockport County were in our division a couple of years ago, all flying now in the Football League. We just want to do the same. We sat down with the board last year and they told us a vision for the future, and that vision most definitely is that we want to be a Football League club. When we went to the Premier League, I know the boys have been saying that they 30 years will be in the Premier League and winning it. Well, let's hope we are, and let's hope I'm still around to see that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, thousands of farmers across the country are set to descend on London tomorrow in protest against the government's budget tax changes, namely inheritance tax on farms worth over £1 million, which sounds like a lot, but it's not when it comes to farmhouses and land.
Because farmers say the average farm costs is valued around £2.5 million. Now, Labour consistently say it's important to support our farmers, and they put £5 billion in the budget for the next 2 years into farming.
Well, here's what Sir Keir Starmer said about his budget at the Welsh Labour conference this weekend, shortly before he exited through the back door.
So make no mistake, I will defend our decisions in the budget all day long.
He exited through the back. We should then have said he exited through the back door. I mean, that was gutless, because there was a large contingent of farmers that said they're peaceful. They're there on their tractors, their combine harvesters. Why didn't you have a conversation with them? Because perhaps, and of course, I just don't believe the figures coming out of the Treasury and the Department of Environment. And I was at a dinner on Friday night in deepest, darkest Essex, in Whittam in Essex.
Oh, it's my neck of the woods.
Well, there was about 90 people there. Endless farmers came up to me. They said, "We're not making it up. Our farms are in peril. We can't afford to die. It's been in the family for generations. The £1 million kicks in, our farm's worth £2.5. It's shocking. It's sad, and they're really worried.
And they're asset-rich, cash-poor.
Cash-poor.
In most examples,
they said, if you knew what we make on a litre of milk, how much the soup... Let's talk to someone who knows more about this than anybody. Teresa Wickham is co-founder of the Women's Farmers Union. Teresa Wickham, good morning to you. The Prime Minister said he'd go anywhere to defend his budget. He wouldn't go out the front door of that conference hall to talk to Welsh farmers. He sneaked out the back door. Not a man of his word.
Well, I think it's very alarming because before he was elected Prime Minister, he went to the National Farmers Union, AGM, and said he would support farmers. And they talk about the $5 billion going into farming in this industry. That's about care for the countryside. That's about sustainability. And what I find really worrying about this, they had 3 months leading up to the Chancellor's statement to do the work on things they were going to do. They didn't even consult their own Department of Farming and Food. They just told them the night before. And what the big problem about it is that they wanted to close a loophole with very large, wealthy companies, people buying land, so they used it as an inheritance loophole. What they've done is they've hit the small farmers, the middle-income ones, and not only is it dangerous for losing them, because you will lose them, this isn't a scare tactics, but we're in the middle of the most a difficult thing in the world. We have no proper plan from this government for food security. How much should we produce here that keeps us safe? If they haven't learnt from the example of Ukraine, which was the breadbasket of Europe, and as soon as Russia invaded, the price of wheat went up and things like that. So we live in a global world. Spain's got floods where we get a lot of horticulture products. So they need to go back to the drawing board. They need to sit down and listen to the people who know the facts, rather than saying, no, we're always right. And actually doing, if not, they're going to do such great damage. You can't switch a farm on or off.
Teresa, what do you make of what the government is arguing, which is that only 28% of farmers are actually going to be affected by all of this? Are those figures that you accept?
Well, I don't know where they got the figures from, because the people that I trust, who are not alarmist but would not do their reputation, say it's far more. And even DEFRA itself, although keeping quiet now, said it was far more. They simply don't know. They've looked at some piece of research, some bright spark in the Treasury, not consulted the people and not checked their facts. And it's certainly far more people than that at the end of the day. And a lot of these people are quite small units, but because of the price of land, and if they've got a farm building on, it adds up to more. As you said before, you know, it sounds a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money. And it isn't the money so much as the food security and the fact that an industry that we need to produce the food here and is working hard. In fact, what's interesting tomorrow, there's a huge food conference in George Street, just round the corner of Parliament, by the Food and Farming Commission from 1 o'clock. And that's what I was always going to go to. So I think that this government, it doesn't like retreating. You know, we're always right. But let's get the facts right before they do untold damage.
And the untold damage, it won't be, if, not only could we lose some of these family farms, Teresa, that have been in the working for generations and generations. That's all that years of experience, but it's also the great love of the countryside in which they farm. That will be gone forever.
Yes, it is. And it's also, I mean, we have an urban government. Don't forget that. Even the Minister of Agriculture is an urban person. But at the end of the day, the countryside is appreciated, particularly during COVID, where people could walk out. And we are spending a lot of that $5 billion, which is absolutely, it replaces what they got from the Common Agricultural Policy. It's not quite the same. But there's been such a focus on sustainability, looking after the countryside. Who's actually going to do that if farmers, these small family farms who are putting in the ponds, putting in the wide edges and things like that, if they're gone because they can't manage their living on this inheritance tax, who does the government think is going to do that? The army?
Yeah. Teresa Wickham, thank you very much. Really good to see you. Thank you very much for your thoughts.
And you take the farmers on at your peril, particularly when you throw in that man, Jeremy Clarkson.
Here's the weather.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So it's turning colder for many of us as we go through this week, with some sleet and snow in the forecast for some of us and plenty of blustery showers across parts of Scotland. These will continue throughout this morning, perhaps leading to some icy stretches through the morning rush hour. But further south, definitely a milder start to the day, plenty of cloud and outbreaks of showery rain around, these perhaps turning heavy across southwestern parts of England. For Northern Ireland, though, a damp end to the day, plenty of rain falling to lower levels, but perhaps some sleet and snow over the hills as we go through the afternoon. And it will be a chilly feeling day for much of northern parts of the UK, only 3 or 4 degrees in places, but just holding on to that slightly milder air further south as we see that rain pushing its way eastwards through the latter half of the day and in towards the evening. This could again turn heavy in places, particularly over any high ground across southwestern parts of England, parts of Wales as well, and generally just a cloudy and damp end to the day for many places. That rain across Northern Ireland, again falling as rain to lower levels, but perhaps some sleet and snow continuing over any high ground. And for much of Scotland, quite a cloudy end to the day. Those snow showers continuing to pile in across the north and the east through Monday evening. As we then go through the rest of Monday, that area of rain pushes its way eastwards, perhaps causing some disruptive sleet and snow across parts of northern England. It will mostly be falling as rain to lower levels, but we could perhaps see up to 20 centimetres of snow across the Pennines by the time we get to Tuesday morning. So do take care if you are travelling during the morning and keep up to date with the latest warnings on that. Further south, there could be some heavy showers and perhaps not quite as mild as it has been recently under all that cloud and rain. A chilly start for much of Scotland and Northern Ireland on Tuesday morning. Again, we could see some ice in places, and there could just be some sleet and snow lingering along some eastern coast through Tuesday afternoon. But for many of us, it will be a drier and brighter end to the day with plenty of sunny spells around, but with northerly winds, it will definitely be feeling colder than we've seen recently. Only 7 or 8 degrees in the south and perhaps only 3 or 4 degrees further north.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Murray, the A941 is closed each way at Lossiemouth for an investigation. On the M8 in North Lanarkshire, the inside lane's closed eastbound, where a lorry's broken down at junction 5 at Shotts, causing queues. On Merseyside, the A565 is closed each way along Albert Road in Southport because of a fire. Buses replaced trains between Llandudno and Blaenau for Stiniog because of poor weather conditions. The M40 in Warwickshire's blocked northbound by an accident between junctions 13 and 14 towards Leamington, causing queues. From Essex into Suffolk, the A12 is closed northbound from the Langham turn-off to Stratford St Mary after an accident with queues from junction 27 at Colchester. On the M25 in Hertfordshire, 2 out of 4 lanes are closed clockwise where a lorry's broken down just after junction 25 for the A10 with queues in both directions. On the M4 in Berkshire, there's a lane closed westbound after an accident between junctions 7 and 8-9 from Slough to Maidenhead, causing delays.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 10 a.m. on Monday, the 18th of November. We are live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and me, Ellie Costello, in for Beverly Turner.
What a pleasure. Delivering for Britain, the Prime Minister is off on his travels for the 15th time since being elected. This time, he's in Brazil for the G20 summit, and our own Christopher Hope is also there.
That's right, I'm here in Rio de Janeiro, where Sir Keir Starmer is about to meet the Chinese president, the first face-to-face meeting with a UK PM in 6 years. But the big question here is, will the UK sanction the use of missiles deep into Russian territory in the war?
Royal security scare. Last month, masked burglars broke into Windsor Castle grounds while Prince William, Catherine and their children were all asleep inside. We'll have the latest.
And farmers are descending on Westminster tomorrow to protest against the government's inheritance tax raid. Are you with the farmers?
The Prime Minister's migrant payout. Sir Keir Starmer backs plans to pay countries like Vietnam and Iraq to stop illegal migrants setting off to Britain in small boats. We're asking, will it work?
So, Bobby's on the beat, not tweets. That's the government's view. They say police should focus on crime rather than social media posts as the row over a tweet from the journalist Alison Pearson rumbles on.
Junior doctors are reportedly favouring lucrative locum salaries as they ditch the NHS and post about it on TikTok. Take a listen to this.
We're just over a month into FY1 and I'm picking up my first locum shift, baby! The hourly rate that I am getting is so vastly different to the normal hourly rate. It is crazy.
I'm very jealous of Christopher Hope.
I've been on that
Making his
beach.
way down to Brazil. I heard about you on this
Very,
beach.
very nice. I wasn't working either, I was on holiday.
Oh, yeah, very nice.
My mum, after she was widowed, used to stay at this spiritual place in Brazil, and I went out there to surprise her. She was absolutely thrilled.
Aww.
And then I spent a few days in Rio de Janeiro on the way back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was lovely.
Well, it looks absolutely beautiful. We're going
Much better than being there with the Prime Minister, which would not be quite the same.
Yeah, Christopher Hope is there for work, we should say.
And so is the Chinese president, who is a monster in my view, and Keir Starmer will be sitting down and talking to him. First contact between PM and president since 2018.
Yes, should we be meeting with the likes of China?
Because of the genocide that's going on with the Uyghur Muslims up there.
Let us know what you think
And
about
Hong
that one.
Kong, the crushing of democracy in Hong Kong.
First meeting in 6 years. Should it be even happening now? Let us know what you think. gbnews.com/yoursay. But before we get into all of that, let's have a look at the headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Ellie, thank you very much. The top story. Sir Keir Starmer says we need to double down on support for Ukraine as President Joe Biden's given the green light to Kyiv to use US-supplied long-range missiles to strike inside Russia. The Prime Minister says Ukraine is top of his agenda at the G20 summit of world leaders and told reporters there's got to be full support as long as it takes. President Vladimir Putin has warned the West they would be playing with fire if they allowed Ukrainian forces to launch Western-supplied cruise and ballistic missiles at Russia, saying it could even trigger a global conflict. It seems a move by North Korea to send thousands of its troops to fight with Russia has changed US calculations and forced Joe Biden into making this decision. Shadow Secretary of State for Defence James Cartledge says the move is justified.
Russia invaded Ukraine, wholly unprovoked, illegal invasion, a dictatorship invading a democracy. So it's been the right thing to do to not be directly involved in Ukraine, but to support them in whatever way we can in terms of providing munitions. That's helped Ukraine to check their advance. But there's been a major development. We talk about escalation. Imagine how the Russians would feel if 10,000 NATO troops were now in Ukraine supporting them. The fact is 10,000 North Korean troops have been deployed into this battle. We understand from the US State Department they've been injected directly into the fight with Russia. That is a major strategic development, and I think in those circumstances this decision is justified.
Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson told GB News that the government are committed to helping the Ukrainian people.
Stand steadfast behind the Ukrainian people, behind the Ukrainian government. That was the case under the last Conservative government, and there was cross-party support in the face of Russian aggression for the Ukrainian people. We continue to maintain that position, and as we enter almost the 1,000th day of the conflict, I think it really brings into sharp focus the sacrifices of the Ukrainian people. And the Prime Minister and the Defence Secretary, from our point of view, will always continue to keep under review what is necessary by way of military aid for the Ukrainian people.
Sir Keir Starmer says he intends to pursue a pragmatic relationship with China when he meets President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit as world leaders meet in Brazil. The Prime Minister said the size of China's economy and its membership of the UN Security Council meant he wanted to have serious and pragmatic discussions with the Chinese leader during his time in Rio de Janeiro. Sir Keir Starmer is set to meet with the President of China in a bid to defrost relations with Beijing. It's the first time that a British Premier has met him since 2018. Well, the Prime Minister says he's absolutely confident that the vast majority of farms and farmers will not be affected by changes to inheritance tax announced in the budget. The row over the taxes for farms worth more than £1 million continues, as the Prime Minister said last night that the money the government has put into the sector is not to be overlooked. Well, a protest is expected in Westminster tomorrow as farmers rally on Whitehall against the changes announced in last month's budget, while separately the National Farmers Union will hold a mass lobby of MPs in their efforts to get the government to rethink. Yesterday, the head of the farming union said that farmers are feeling betrayed about the changes to inheritance tax. In other news, burglars raided the Windsor Castle estate while the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children reportedly slept nearby. The King and Queen were not in the residence. The Sun reported that two men are said to have climbed a 6-foot fence at night, stolen farm vehicles during that raid last month. They used a stolen truck to break through a gate said to be the nearest exit for the Prince, Princess and their children before targeting Shaw Farm, a working farm inside the estate. Now, that pair remain at large. Elsewhere, domestic energy prices are expected to go up again in the new year, according to consultancy Cornwall Insight. A household using a typical amount of gas and electricity will pay £1,736 a year from January. Now, that would be a £17 a year rise compared with the current typical annual bill of £1,717, with prices forecast to stay high for the rest of winter. Energy regulator Ofgem will announce the next official quarterly price cap on Friday. The energy cap limits the maximum price that can be charged for each unit of gas and electricity rather than the total bill. And the Met Office says the UK is braced for disruptive snow and ice and cold temperatures over the coming days. Up to 20 centimetres of snow may accumulate in the worst affected areas in the country's first taste of winter, according to the forecaster. The Met Office has issued several yellow weather warnings for snow and ice for parts of the UK that began yesterday afternoon and are in place until tomorrow morning, but said there's potential for warnings to be escalated. Well, today, a warning comes into force at 7 p.m. and will be in place until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, covering areas in the East Midlands, Yorkshire, Wales and the north of England. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
Thanks, Tatiana. Hello and welcome. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and me, Ellie Costello, in for Bev Turner. So many emails coming in this morning. Thank you so much. On the farmers' protest tomorrow, Andy says farmers are more respected than MPs, more so than Parliament, and definitely more than any Labour MPs. They should be listened to.
And Victor says, typical Starmer hypocrisy. He lampooned Nigel Farage during Prime Minister's questions about the amount of time he was in America, yet here he is on his 15th trip abroad, on his way to Rio. I think he's probably already there, topping up suntan. He must have a lot of air miles.
Oh, well, yes.
Talking of Nigel Farage, look who's in the studio.
Yes.
Richard, good morning.
Richard Tice is here with
Your
us.
colleague in crime and prime and all that, Richard Tice of the Reform Party. Richard, let's just talk to you quickly about the farmers, first of all. We don't know how many are going to turn up tomorrow. But
hopefully lots.
Yeah, I hope so.
Lots from my constituency of Boston, Skegness, they'll be there.
Yeah, well, I was up in North Essex at the weekend. I was overwhelmed by the people coming up and saying, thank you, GB News, for what you're doing. Farmers, we are really, really in a bad way. This is going to destroy businesses, been running for generations. Do you think the government don't get it?
I think the truth is they actually, some of them don't understand, and others, it is ideologically just resentful of farmers, and they've got this badly wrong. Everybody knows that, but if you're in a hole, stop digging. Actually, and there's an expression in business: the first loss is the best loss. If you got it wrong, just say, we've got the number wrong, we've got the threshold wrong. You can see what we're trying to do, which is prevent abuse of the tax benefit.
Very rich people buying.
Very rich people buying. So you could say you've got to be involved in farming for 10 years, not 2. You could increase the threshold to 5 or 10 million. There's simple ways to deal with potential abuse of the tax system. Instead, they've just got this completely wrong. They don't understand how farms work. They don't understand that you can be asset rich but cash poor, and the impact on growth. I know one farmer that's cancelled a £1 million extension to his strawberry business under polytunnels. I know another farmer who's cancelled a £300,000 order for new equipment. I know a publican in my constituency who's scrapped plans to open a new pub, a new bar.
That's because there's national insurance.
Just because of all the pressures around it, and the national insurance and the risk and business property relief and all this stuff. So it's already impacting on growth. We've seen the disastrous growth figures, and farmers, quite rightly, are absolutely furious, and they were lied to by this government. They said during the election campaign there were no plans to change the agricultural property relief, and that's what they've done. So, yeah, I think farmers will demonstrate legally, peacefully tomorrow in big numbers. And there's all sorts of other things. Well, should they go on a sort of a production strike or something? Who knows? But the government needs to start listening.
And it's a concern, isn't it, with the world the way it is? Food security, you would think, would be top of the agenda. I mean, what is more important?
Well, they keep saying it's top of the agenda, but I think people are sick and tired of mainstream politicians saying one thing and doing exactly the opposite. And all their budget will do is increase bills everywhere, including on farms and on food, and it's disastrous.
Where have they got the figures from? Because the Treasury say, I mean, I saw one report saying it'll affect 100 farms, another saying 500 farms. Well, frankly, even if it affects 500 farms, that's 500 farms too many.
But it's actually not that. What it is, it's the impact on all farmers.
Yeah.
And the average farm is give or take 250 acres, and that's a small family farm that will be lucky to make the average national salary, but it's part of commitment to the countryside and food production. The Treasury figures are based on including hobby farmers, someone who's got 5 or 10 acres of pony paddocks and all that. Yeah. It's ridiculous. They don't understand, and they've just got to admit they've got it wrong.
What do you make of Keir Starmer sitting down with Xi Jinping in Brazil today? First time in 6 years that a British Prime Minister has done so. Should we be meeting with the likes of China?
There's no harm in talking as long as you are robust in what you're going to say. And look, jaw is better than war. So as long as he's clear that, yes, we can trade with China, but the human rights abuses, for example, of the Uyghur Muslims is completely unacceptable. Hong Kong is completely unacceptable. And so don't be surprised. And Taiwan is another deep concern. And he's got to make those points clearly and robustly. And if we're not satisfied with the answers, and by the way, China, of course, is sanctioning a number of members of Parliament, and I think some peers in the House of Lords, I think. So he's got to make those points very, very clearly. And if he's not satisfied with the answers, then frankly, what we should be saying is, don't be surprised if we're going to put tariffs on some of your goods. I mean, I don't want cheap Chinese solar panels, which basically means, as part of our sort of net zero madness, driving up our energy bills, and nor do the majority of the British public.
Tell us about the Reform UK taking out a private prosecution against the men allegedly involved in that incident at Manchester Airport way back in
July the 23rd, which is almost 4 months ago. And look, there's a very serious incident occurred. Most people will have seen the video footage, and everyone's astonished that the Crown Prosecution Service have not yet made a decision as to whether or not to charge anybody. And our view is, and we gave them notice back on October the 7th, our view is that this was of sufficient gravity, that it is in the public interest. We think a crime may possibly have been committed, and we're obviously careful about the lawyers and all that good stuff. But this looks a very serious incident, and actually our police officers, they stand in harm's way, they protect us, mostly when they're unarmed. In this case, some of them were armed. They have a right to feel that the law will protect them in the event that there's a serious incident taking place. And so we think that a crime may have taken place and it is in the public interest, and that's the threshold. So if the Crown Prosecution Service are not going to do it, we think that it's incumbent upon us to start a private criminal prosecution to see whether those threshold tests are met.
Fascinating.
OK,
fascinating.
Richard Tice, good to see you.
We've got to read a statement from the Crown prosecution. Bear in mind, this was, as Richard Tice, did you say July the
23rd?
We're considering material and providing advice in relation to a series of alleged criminal offences at Manchester Airport in July this year.
We're working with Greater Manchester Police and the Independent Office for Police Conduct whilst their inquiries continue. Richard Tice, good to see you. Thank you very much.
Always good to talk to you. Now, it's time for our poll of the day. Today we're asking, do you think Donald Trump is right to adopt Britain's Ditch to Rwanda plan?
Well, we're bringing you the live results throughout the day, so make sure you stay tuned. The final result will be announced later in Martin Daubney's show. And as always, for all the latest polls, news and how to vote, just go to gbnews.com/poll.
Up next, find out which member of Donald Trump's top new team may not have been so unhappy when he was presented with a McDonald's meal on board a plane at the weekend.
You might be able to tell from this photo,
But it wasn't Nigel Farage, because he wasn't there.
Yeah.
You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
We all know that pensioners will freeze to death this winter because of the cruel cut to the winter fuel payment, rising council tax, the energy price cap going up, all of that. Now, instead of looking after them, we appear to have a government that seems to want to make their lives worse. Now, they might not care, but you do. And thanks to you, I have now raised more than £270,000 for Friends of the Elderly. You have raised more than the entire amount they gave away in grants for the most desperate pensioners last year. So amazing effort. Thank you very much. Now, I said I'd do a freezing cold swim to raise awareness for how cold some pensioners will be in their own homes this winter. And on Saturday, I went to Stickle Tarn in the Lake District. I'd like to give a massive thank you to the people who turned up to meet me along the way. I would also like to give a monumental shout-out to the wonderful camera crew. We've got John Clark and Joe Scowen, and our health and safety maestro, known only as The Stag. I come up with these crackpot ideas, but it is down to those wonderful people to make them actually happen. I would also like to give you a little warning. There are aspects of this footage that you will not be able to unsee. I am aware that at times my body resembles a bag of milk. But you know what? If me embarrassing myself helps to raise a bit more money, then so be it. And you can go to justgiving.com/page/Save Our Seniors now to donate.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
(10:19), Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and the fabulous Eddie Costello. Got the panel with us here. But before we introduce them, should we introduce them now? Matthew Talbot, former Labour advisor, and my former friend from the Institute of Economic Affairs. You're much grander now. What's your title now?
I'm the Director of Popular Conservatives.
Director of Popular Conservatives. You forgot his tie.
Yeah.
Mark Littlewood.
No, I wear a tie in the evening, not all day.
That's what you call popular conservatives, eh? Yeah. Right. Now, I want you gentlemen to listen to this interview with Bridget Phillipson, who is our illustrious Secretary of State for Education, when she was asked a pretty simple question.
Called another kid, said that they smelt like fish. Surely you would accept, on the face of it, that that's preposterous for the police to be involved.
As a point of principle, and I mean this sincerely, I think it's unwise for politicians to get involved in discussions around operational policing matters.
Yeah, but the point is that you're the Education Secretary, so you're in charge of what happens in our classrooms.
2 points. As you say, I am responsible for what happens in our classrooms. I'm not responsible for the police forces in our country.
So what she was asked was, the police were called because a 9-year-old, oh no, he said to another child in the classroom, "You smell a fish." Now, she's read this report. It was in the Times today. She read it yesterday. She says she can't make any comment, even in principle, as to whether it's right or wrong. Has the world gone mad?
Well, she's gone mad, hasn't she, Andrew? I mean, it's quite clearly wrong in principle. You might say, as a rider, I haven't read all of the details. Perhaps, you know, a punch was thrown or threatened to be thrown. But in principle, it is absolutely bananas. And she accepts she's responsible for what happens in the classroom. Well, why on earth does she have no opinion about what happened in this classroom, which seems to be a complete overreaction to a minor tiff?
I mean, Matthew, even Rachel Reeves has come out and said that the Chancellor has said this is a waste of police time. I mean, why can't Bridget Phillipson say that?
It's a question for Bridget Phillipson. I don't know. I struggle to think this is actually what's happened. Surely this isn't the case. There must be, for the police to be involved, it must be something to do with the parents and both parents having a go. I cannot believe that someone has said someone smells a fish and the police have gone to go see that.
She's the Secretary of State for Education. She was told about this yesterday. She had a good 20 hours to get to the bottom. She's the Secretary of State for Education, Matthew. She could get to the head teacher. She could get to the police force involved. It's not difficult. I was raging at the screen thing, for God's sake, woman, just say in principle this is insanity.
I think in principle...
don't want police officers in classrooms with 9-year-olds.
No, I agree.
Think of the terrible things people used to call me at school, and vice versa.
Yeah, me as well.
Worse than that.
I think in principle, you're right. I suppose...
Why couldn't she say that then?
Well, I suppose if you're going to get involved in every classroom squabble that may come up on the news, it's a very dangerous precedent to set. Now, I can't believe I'm in the position of...
police going in to feel the collar of a 9-year-old,
well,
Matthew?
I agree, but it could be a dangerous precedent to set. I can't believe I'm sat here sort of trying to defend this because it is ludicrous. But if I'm trying to be fair, if she's to weigh in on every little thing that comes up, then obviously she's got greater priorities than just that. As the
but she seems determined to weigh in on nothing. She's going to hide behind the cloak of I don't comment on anything at all operational. So any operational matter that happens in any classroom on any basis, involving the police or not, apparently is not within her purview. What's the point of her being the Secretary of State for Education?
And she's quite a controlling Education Secretary too.
Well, yeah, maybe, yeah.
Is she? I don't know. Is that a statement or a question?
No, I mean, she's hands-on. She's appointed a new education czar. She gave us a view on assisted dying. A lot of cabinet ministers we thought the suggestion was going to be cabinet going to keep out of it because they don't want to put pressure on backbenchers. She's told us today, another cabinet minister, she's not in support of it. So, and that's a very complicated issue. She gave a response, so I just think it's staggering. Teachers must be pulling their hair out.
Well, they might be, and listen, it will be a case of Labour politicians being scared of their own shadow, and I've seen this now for the last decade, where people are terrified to have an opinion because they are governed via Twitter and are worried about any little comment that will come against them or what the party membership may say, and really, it's... People at home will likely be doing what you're doing and going, why won't you just answer the question?
Surely
That's what
here,
people have
though,
done for
the
years.
political price for having no opinion is higher than the political price of expressing an opinion. And look, I think it would have been fine if she said, look, I haven't got to the bottom of it yet. I did put in some inquiries yesterday. I don't know all the details. I'm getting to the bottom of it because it looks pretty strange. She's not even willing to go that far.
Yeah, no, if it was me trying to give her a line and we expected this to come, I would say maybe you should say we haven't got all the details. This sounds very concerning to me and I'd like to look into it further. That way you're not actually saying anything, but you're getting away with not saying anything.
But these non-crime hate incidents, which is what they're called, they need to be looked at, don't they, when there's children as young as 9 being reported to the police for them. And then you've got priests and vicars was also reading in the papers over the weekend. I mean, that's ludicrous, isn't it?
It is. I think I'm right in saying if
and
you're 9...
it's a waste of police time and resources.
Aren't you below the age of criminal liability anyway?
It's 10.
So it's 10. So, I mean, you can't...
But
you're not going to arrest a 9-year-old.
It's non-crime. This is the weird thing of the... And I think the problem with this is... there is a difference between something being grossly offensive, as the law deems it, which I think is very vague language in the first place, and something that is incitement. And I think, you know, one person's offence is another person's joke, and we have to be careful. And I think part of this is the law was set, you know, whenever it was set, and we would laugh at things 20 years ago that we might not laugh at now when society changes. So the law needs to be looked at.
Do you know what made me think? We were talking earlier, guys, about there's been a break-in at a farm on the Windsor Royal Park estate a month ago. Nobody been caught. Welcome to the real world. We had 2 coppers turn up at the home of Alison Pearson, a journalist over a, what is it called, a non-hate...
Non-crime
hate incident over a year ago. No wonder nobody turns up when you get burgled. No wonder when there's shoplifters ransacking your shop, it doesn't reach a certain threshold, £250, the police don't invest, because they're doing all this nonsense.
Yeah, you've got to question the priorities. I suppose, let me try and find some sort of sympathy for the police here.
It's the people who direct them, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's not the police officers.
Exactly.
They do a great job.
In the ranks as well.
Exactly. Once they've got their targets and their framework set for them, if that framework is, you know, we need to make sure that there's sort of less offensive things on Twitter than there were previously in Essex, they all respond to that incentive. It's why I was a bit disturbed about Keir Starmer saying that, firstly, this was talking about free speech and hurt feelings. Firstly, obviously, this is a matter for the police themselves, police force by police force. Well, I don't think it is. I think it's a matter for politicians who set the framework. I don't want the police force deciding, in our area, Twitter is more important than breaking into Windsor Castle. I want politicians to set that framework. And the Prime Minister seems about as vague as the Secretary of State for Education.
And the framework does need to be looked at, because actually the fundamental use of a non-crime hate incident was to tackle terrorism, because as we know, terrorists would use social media, wouldn't they, to recruit, to spread their message. So in terms of like the PREVENT programme, tackling something on social media before it becomes something much more serious is obviously very useful. But when you're seeing 9-year-old children then being given non-crime hate incidents, that's
Well, what do you make to his point about you do want direction from the top? Shouldn't be each police force has a different view?
It's a dereliction of duty, I think, by the Prime Minister, downwards. Because I just think the language in the bill itself is vague. There's loopholes within it. We have to be able to because it's all about opinions. What is grossly offensive? Your threshold for offence may be much larger than others, and something you could say to me I might laugh at. In fact, we've got ourselves in a situation. You could say my beard looks terrible today. I would laugh at it.
You say that every week.
I know. I'm sure you would. Somebody at home could report you and be offended on my behalf, which would be totally sweet of them or whatever. I can totally handle myself.
There, you can report me. I don't like Matthew Talbert's beard. But it's not personal, I just don't like beard.
But why do we care about things being grossly offensive?
Yeah, no,
it's not a police matter. It's a matter of just courtesy.
And get on with it.
Get on with it. So what? You know, I care about people being punched, robbed, you know, mugged, that sort of stuff. I don't care about people being offended. That's certainly not a matter for the cops.
Well, let us know what you think on that one. You'll have an opinion, gbnews.com/you'll say. Look, Matthew, we need to look at our favourite story of the day. Andrew and I love this one. Tell us about Mo Farah. In the Times today.
Sir Mo Farah.
Sir Mo Farah,
Mo Farah's took a leaf out of my book. I had to do this last year. So
tell us more.
He's had his... Well, I was on a night out in northwest London and this girl had her phone robbed. And in a glory of haze, I thought, no, someone has to do something.
Is a glory of haze alcohol?
At the time, yes. I don't drink anymore. There's probably good reason for it. I ran down the road after this fella, booted him to the floor and got the phone back.
Did you get it back? Oh, good for you.
But no, but the problem was I then saw sort of this gang sort of surrounding and looking. I thought, I need to get in a taxi quick. This has been organised and I shouldn't really be getting involved.
Did you get the phone back to the girl?
Yeah, the girl and the boyfriend and whatever got the phone back. But But the problem is, you think about it afterwards and you go, you're putting your life in your own hands in London because...
He probably grossly offended somebody as well.
He could have reported me for assault, in fairness, you know. But yeah, no, fair play to Mo Farah. He's had his phone nicked and he's legged it after the fella and got it back. Good for him.
Of course he has.
Yeah, imagine looking in the mirror Oh, I can out.
And it's picked on the wrong victim.
But he's and of course he's a wiry, stocky fella, but he's not a big lad.
No, he's not a big lad.
Yeah.
I mean, all credit to him. I'm going to be honest. I would be a complete coward in these circumstances. I mean, it's a real pain if you get your phone stolen. But it's not a total disaster. I could get a new one and get it backed up within 24 hours.
No.
And you know, I wonder why people bother nicking these things. They're worth a lot less than they were back in the day. I remember the day when people would smash in the windscreen of a car to nick your transistor radio, for God's sake.
Yes.
And, fair play to him, fair play to you, Matthew, as well. But I've got to say, Mo Farah and Matthew are both rather braver men than me. I would gladly surrender my iPhone in those circumstances.
I would give chase over my phone.
Would you?
I really would. I can't stand it. It's just too irritating.
Well, it's awful. I don't get my phone out now.
They blame me over like a fly, of course, because I weigh 9 stone nothing. But still.
Yeah, it's the principle that
counts. Do you think they would look in the mirror and think, oh, my God? They just think, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, you're probably about the same build as Mo Farah, but I suspect rather slower than him.
Yeah,
It's such a sophisticated operation now. I mean, if they take your phone in London, let's say, on a Saturday night, it would be in Eastern Europe by the Sunday morning. Of
course it
would.
would.
And I know that, because I had a friend who had a phone stolen, and it was in Eastern Europe.
There's
by
the black
Sunday.
market. My friend had theirs, it turned up in China. Somebody's obviously worked out a way to jailbreak iPhones and stuff, and you can make quick, easy cash out of stolen phones.
The real question is, Eddie, what do you think of Matthew Talbot's beard?
I don't love it.
There we are.
I'll be honest.
All right, you know. I'm not drawing you into it, Mark. He's going to be diplomatic.
Matthew, Mark, we've got to leave it there. Probably best we do. Thank you very much indeed. Let's have a look at your news headlines now with Tatiana Sanchez.
Ellie, thank you very much. Well, the top stories, and we start this bulletin with some breaking news that the Metropolitan Police says 2 police constables have been charged with sexual assault. 41-year-old Jerome Beasley and 39-year-old Luke Robinson have each been charged with 4 counts of sexual assault against a woman in central London in April whilst off duty. Now they're set to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on Wednesday and are both currently suspended from duty. More on that breaking story as we get it. In other news, Sir Keir Starmer says we need to double down on support for Ukraine as President Joe Biden has given the green light to Kyiv to use US-supplied long-range missiles to strike inside Russia. The Prime Minister says Ukraine is top of his agenda at the G20 summit of world leaders and told reporters there's got to be full support as long as it takes. President Vladimir Putin has warned the West they would be playing with fire if they allowed Ukrainian forces to launch Western-supplied cruise and ballistic missiles at Russia, saying it could even trigger a global conflict. It seems a move by North Korea to send thousands of its troops to fight with Russia has changed US calculations and forced Joe Biden into making this decision. Shadow Secretary of State for Defence James Cartledge says the move is justified.
Russia invaded Ukraine, wholly unprovoked, illegal invasion, a dictatorship invading a democracy. So it's been the right thing to do to not be directly involved in Ukraine, but to support them in whatever way we can in terms of providing munitions. That's helped Ukraine to check their advance. But there's been a major development. We talk about escalation. Imagine how the Russians would feel if 10,000 NATO troops were now in Ukraine supporting them. The fact is 10,000 North Korean troops have been deployed into this battle. We understand from the US State Department they've been injected directly into the fight with Russia. That is a major strategic development, and I think in those circumstances this decision is justified.
Sir Keir Starmer says he intends to pursue a pragmatic relationship with China when he meets President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit as world leaders meet in Brazil. The Prime Minister said the size of China's economy and its membership of the UN Security Council meant he wanted to have serious and pragmatic discussions with the Chinese leader during his time in Rio de Janeiro. Sir Keir Starmer set to meet with the President of China in a bid to defrost relations with Beijing. Now, it's the first time that a British Premier has met the Chinese President since 2018. And burglars raided the Windsor Castle estate while the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children reportedly slept nearby. The King and Queen were not in the residence. The Sun reported that 2 men climbed a 6-foot fence at night and stole farm vehicles during the raid last month. They used a stolen truck to break through a gate said to be the nearest exit for the Prince, Princess and their children before targeting Shaw Farm, a working farm inside the estate. The pair remain at large. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More news from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Still to come, never here. Sakir, where is he now? Oh, he's in Brazil for the G20 summit. It's his 15th overseas trip since taking office. Stay tuned for more on this. Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So it's turning colder for many of us as we go through this week, with some sleet and snow in the forecast for some of us and plenty of blustery showers across parts of Scotland. These will continue throughout this morning, perhaps leading to some icy stretches through the morning rush hour. But further south, definitely a milder start to the day, plenty of cloud and outbreaks of showery rain around, these perhaps turning heavy across southwestern parts of England. For Northern Ireland, though, a damp end to the day, plenty of rain falling to lower levels, but perhaps some sleet and snow over the hills as we go through the afternoon. And it will be a chilly feeling day for much of northern parts of the UK, only 3 or 4 degrees in places, but just holding on to that slightly milder air further south as we see that rain pushing its way eastwards through the latter half of the day and in towards the evening. This could again turn heavy in places, particularly over any high ground across southwestern parts of England, parts of Wales as well, and generally just a cloudy and damp end to the day for many places. That rain across Northern Ireland, again falling as rain to lower levels, but perhaps some sleet and snow continuing over any high ground. And for much of Scotland, quite a cloudy end to the day. Those snow showers continuing to pile in across the north and the east through Monday evening. As we then go through the rest of Monday, that area of rain pushes its way eastwards, perhaps causing some disruptive sleet and snow across parts of northern England. It will mostly be falling as rain to lower levels, but we could perhaps see up to 20 centimetres of snow across the Pennines by the time we get to Tuesday morning. So do take care if you are travelling during the morning and keep up to date with the latest warnings on that. Further south, there could be some heavy showers and perhaps not quite as mild as it has been recently under all that cloud and rain. A chilly start for much of Scotland and Northern Ireland on Tuesday morning. Again, we could see some ice in places, and there could just be some sleet and snow lingering along some eastern coast through Tuesday afternoon. But for many of us, it will be a drier and brighter end to the day with plenty of sunny spells around, but with northerly winds, it will definitely be feeling colder than we've seen recently. Only 7 or 8 degrees in the south and perhaps only 3 or 4 degrees further north.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the M80 North Lanarkshire, the inside lane's closed eastbound, where a lorry's broken down at junction 5 at Shotts, causing queues. On the M621 in West Yorkshire, there are 2 lanes closed westbound after an accident between junction 7 and 6 near Leeds, causing delays. From Essex into Suffolk, the A12 is closed northbound from the Langham turn to Stratford St Mary after an accident, with queues from junction 26 near Colchester. On the M25 in Essex, it's down to a single lane anti-clockwise just after junction 26 at Waltham Abbey after an accident, with queues from junction 27 for the M11. On the M25 in Hertfordshire, 2 out of 4 lanes are closed clockwise, where a lorry's broken down just after junction 25 for the A10, with queues from junction 24 at Potters Bar. On the M4 in Monmouthshire, there's a lane closed eastbound, where someone's broken down between junctions 23 and 22 from the M48 to the M49, causing queues.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 10:38. You're watching Britain's Newsroom with me and Andrew today, and so many emails coming through. Thank you so much for your company.
Most of them are saying how thrilled they are to see you.
No, saying how thrilled they are to see us, which is nice. Jacqueline says, really love to see Andrew and Ellie presenting on the show. They're so natural and look as though they really do genuinely respect and enjoy each other's company.
That's because we do.
And that's because we do.
Do you think they're suggesting that Beverly and I don't?
No, I love you and Bev together.
We do have our moments of...
You're like a married couple. It's like the bickering and
yeah,
there's a lot of love there.
There's a bit of bickering. There's a bit of bickering.
But that's what makes good telly.
Yeah.
So, no, absolutely, it's the best combo. Andy's been in touch saying Starmer is so confident he's right about farms that he can't be bothered to talk to the farmers, and he's now jet-setting to Brazil. And Lucia says no sooner had Keir Starmer got the keys to number 10, he was out of the country at the NATO summit in Washington. When he returns from Brazil this week, he would have been out of the country for 26 days, 5 working weeks. He's only been in office 5 months.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? Look, of course, he's Prime Minister, but he does have a Foreign Secretary who can do the job for him. Oh, hang on, who's his Foreign Secretary? David Lammy. Would you unleash him too often? Well, he chose him as his foreign secretary. I think he should be in the G20 because all world leaders are there.
All the other world
but he did not
leaders
need to be at that pointless environment summit last week. What was it called?
COP29.
Who was there?
In Azerbaijan.
The leader of Italy. The French president wasn't there. The German chancellor wasn't there.
Biden wasn't there.
And nor was the president of India, one of the biggest polluting countries in the world. However, the Taliban were there. That must have been a great moment. China weren't there either, of course, big polluting country.
Yes, but his
Pointless
meeting with
waste
Xi
of money.
Jinping today?
Yes, on the sidelines. I suspect we won't see many images of it.
No.
Because there's too many big issues. Hong Kong has been... Democracy in Hong Kong, once a British state till 1997, colony, completely screwed over by the Chinese. We've got the Uyghurs in China.
Uyghur Muslims, and human rights
which Keir
abuses.
Starmer, in a Commons motion in 2021, said should now be called genocide.
Wow.
So he's talking
And
to
we know he doesn't
genocidal
use that
leader.
word lightly because he won't use it in Gaza.
He won't. But so he's sitting down with... But he keeps making the point, it's the biggest trading nation in the world and we want a trade deal.
They've got the threats over Taiwan as well, but despite all of that, he's saying that they're going to meet for serious pragmatic decisions today because China is one of our biggest trading partners. But we haven't met, as in Britain hasn't met, with China for 6 years. The last meeting, bilateral meeting between the two nations was 2018 under Theresa May.
A lot has changed since
Should it be
then.
happening now? Let us know what you think. gbnews.com/yoursay. Now, road accidents are now the leading cause of death amongst teenagers across the globe. That's according to the World Health Organization.
I assume it's because they're always on their phones and devices.
Very true.
The AA says 80% of drivers also underestimate the risk driving poses to teenagers. Well, can't they take responsibility for themselves? However, our reporter Anna Riley is looking at the impact of those dangers.
More than 1,700 people die on UK roads every year. Another 30,000 receive serious life-changing injuries. Young people are most at risk. Ross Scott was 23 years old when his car hit a tree after aquaplaning on rainwater. He suffered a severe brain injury and was put in a coma for 3 months.
A broken skull, blazed the brain, broken eye socket, broke my left shoulder, my brachial plexus, I said, broke all my ribs, tore my spleen, collapsed lungs and my heart moved to the back of my chest.
When Ross emerged from his coma, he faced a new reality. The former electrician had to use a wheelchair and learn how to walk again.
Before the car accident, I had a good life and was able to travel, work and stuff and I actually enjoyed my work, but now I'm no longer allowed to go back to work through health and safety because of all the injuries. The whole life is just not working and sitting about the house and you wonder what you're doing with yourself. So that's why I'm now volunteering for the Special Olympics as a football coach. I'll never be 100% back fully to what I was, but it's just sort of accepting and dealing with making the best of what you have, really. Unlucky in a way that it happened, but in a way I'm lucky to still be here to tell the tale.
This Road Safety Week, police are encouraging people to act responsibly on the roads.
The last thing we want is for another family to lose a loved one unnecessarily on the roads through poor decision making. Do not take drink or drugs whilst driving or before you get behind the wheel of a vehicle. Slow down. Drive with courtesy and respect. Do not be careless or dangerous in your manoeuvre. Never use your mobile phone and always wear your seatbelt.
Just don't rush when you're driving today, love. Drive safely, okay?
Yeah, Mum.
Admiral Car Insurance is also campaigning for families with young drivers to make road safety a priority.
Young drivers are involved in about a fifth of all collisions where there's a serious injury or a death. And our own claims data shows that drivers under the age of 25 are nearly twice as likely to make a claim for a crash involving serious injury than somebody over 25. So we just thought it was really important to try and do something to try and address driver behaviour amongst young people.
Road Safety Week is the biggest campaign of its type and aims to reduce road deaths and injuries. Anna Riley, GB News.
Well, something does need to be done, doesn't it? Because the amount of stories you hear now about teenagers dying in their cars, often Full cars, actually, with a number of teenagers inside.
Well,
That's because the AA were talking about last month, weren't they?
Terrible accident in Wales, North Wales,
Yes,
last year.
yes.
4 boys all killed.
I think 4 boys,
Yeah,
But this one, the AA was saying last month that there should be a ban. If you're under the age of 21, you shouldn't have other 21-year-olds
That's right.
or below
And,
passengers with you.
But also, you should, as part of your driving test, have been taught how to drive on a motorway, which you're not.
That's actually true, yes.
That's a
Because
real,
you've got nothing, have you?
You can go straight from driving the car, aged 18 or whatever age you are, 17, to cars driving 70 or, more likely, 100 miles an hour.
And it's a whole other kettle of fish, isn't it, driving on a motorway?
Yeah, my driving instructor all those years ago took me on a motorway, and it was pretty terrifying.
Yeah. I'm still terrified now.
And even after I passed my test, I paid an extra lesson with my driving instructor to take me on the motorway to drive.
Well, you're very wise.
Yeah, well,
and maybe that should be...
I worked in the Midlands and I needed the motorway a lot for work, so I thought that was a sensible thing to do.
Well, maybe that should be the way that things are. You can't actually pass your test unless you at least run less on the motorway. Let us know what you think. GBnews.com/you'll say.
Now, up next, the Prime Minister's hinting Britain could pay countries to take back illegal migrants. I believe that when I see it. Stay tuned to find out more. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Following the summer riots and the resurgence of far-right ideologies, the former Education Secretary told peers that reinforcing shared values is now more crucial than ever.
So we're asking this morning, should we teach British values or would it be a step backward?
Or how do you even start? To debate this now, we're joined by the Campaign for Real Education chairman, Chris McGovern, and political commentator Matthew Stadlen.
Well, I think these days, particularly in schools, it's quite fashionable to look at the negative sides of Britain's identity, particularly British history. Personally, I think I'm very proud of being British, and I think we need to be proud of our country like most other countries around the world are.
As Chris says, Matthew, lots of other countries do it. Heck, you only have to look at the United States, don't you, to see how sort of patriotic they are. Is there anything wrong in trying to instil a bit of that amongst our youth?
I'm just worried it sounds a little bit communist, Stephen, being told what it is to be British. I've got my own personal but very vague views of what British values might be: inclusivity, patience, being able to queue, decency, respect for democracy and the rule of law. But I mean, very many people will have different sets of values. Some people are racist. So are British values racist? You talked about the far right. I think we all know what the far right is. It's sort of violent, xenophobic racism. But if you have, say, I don't know, 3-4 million people in this country who might describe themselves as racist or far right, and they're British, or as British as you lot and as I am, does that mean those values get taught in schools? My worry is it's a little bit communist.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. Now, the Prime Minister has hinted that the UK could start paying countries in efforts to stop migrants entering the UK illegally.
The government will announce, we think, an Italian-style immigration deal with countries including Kurdistan and Vietnam. The idea being to stop them leaving in the first place, as opposed to Rwanda, where we were going to send them off. Let's talk to the immigration lawyer, Ivan Sampson, who is an old friend of this programme. Morning to you, Ivan. How are you today?
Morning, Andrew. I'm very well indeed.
What do you make of this latest idea by the government to effectively stop the boats? Because what they've been doing so far, 5 months since they got into power, has failed manifestly.
Indeed. I mean, it's interesting what the Yvette Cooper's, what her plans were before they got to power. And she was castigating the Home Office for not having safe legal routes to tackle the problem, to stop illegal migration. And they seem to have ditched all of that. They've forgotten what they were saying, and they were attacking the Conservative Party, the government, previous government for. So I don't know what's happened to those plans, but it's been done before. We've paid.
I'll just stop you there, Ivan. Should she? Are you irritated that she has abandoned those plans?
Yes, I am irritated because the only way anyone can claim asylum in the UK is to be physically here in the UK. There are no safe legal routes for people to do that. With regard to paying people, to paying governments to stop people leaving in the first place, it's been done before. We've paid France, as you all know, close on to £500 million. Now, I don't know about you, but I've not seen any data from the French authorities of exactly how many people they've stopped, and is it value for money? Just suppose they've stopped a few thousand, let's just say. I don't know what the figures are. But when you work it out on the sums involved, where's that money being spent? So it may well be a short-term fix, but I'd expect my government to secure our borders. That's one of the key jobs of government, is to make sure that our borders are secure. Now, what the government is saying, we don't have the policies, strategies, or ideas to do that, so we're just going to pay somebody else to stop them leaving their country. I think it's an abrogation of responsibility.
But if it works, Ivan, if it works, if it stops them coming...
Well, it may well work short-term, but that's not a long-term strategy, Andrew. We need to be able to secure our borders. And look, we only know about people claiming asylum. We have absolutely no idea of those coming across the channel who just disappear into the night, into the black economy. What about those people? Not everybody claims asylum. I mean, the estimates are close to 1 million people are in the UK illegally, and we have no idea where they are and have no plans or any strategies to remove them. So I'm afraid it goes back to that same basic fundamental responsibility of the government, is to secure our borders, and they're not able to do that.
Do you think that this will be different from the deal that we've made with France and the £500 million that we've sent to France so far, in the sense that sending money to France is actually too little too late, because the migrants, legal migrants, are already there. We're waiting to get in small boats, waiting to get across the channel. Whereas what Labour have been saying so far is if you actually tackle the problem at source, and perhaps by sending money to the likes of Iraq and Kurdistan, you are tackling it at source, it stops them making that move in the first place. Do you think it could work in that sense?
I haven't seen the plans of how they're going. I mean, look at the size of the borders we're talking about. Of just taking, for example, Iraq, the size of that border. And then once they get into the next country, what do? We pay them as well? And we keep paying people until we end up, well, we've already paid the French. We don't need to pay them anymore. So, no, I don't think that's the solution. It's a gimmick, because Labour has no ideas, has no strategies, has no policies or ways in which to tackle this problem.
Well, I thought they were going to smash the gangs. I thought they were going to smash the gangs.
Well, there you are. And, you know the reports of people who've done reports on these. Once you smash one gang, guess what happens? Another one springs up. And they're chasing their tail. So I'm afraid it's not a centralised gang, let's say, that you can cut off the head of the snake. It's not like that. They are small units, and when you get rid of one unit, another one pops up, because the monies are so much money to be made.
OK, Ivan Sampson, we're out of time with you, I'm afraid, but thank you so much for your thoughts there.
I normally have a barney with Ivan, but we didn't have one today.
No.
Because I don't want...
Well, safe and legal routes, what do you think? He's saying there are none.
Come here, get your application processed here and send them back. They'll disappear.
Yeah.
Well, they're disappearing anyway.
Well, they are, yeah.
I mean, how many do we ever send back?
Well, we can't really, can we?
And how many of them are genuinely genuine asylum seekers. How many of them are economic migrants? The ones I see, they all seem to be in their 30s on their expensive phones.
Well, let us know what you think. Do you think this is the way to do it? Send money to countries in order to incentivise them to stop migrants making their way to Britain. Let us know what you think. gbnews.com/yoursay. We're going to go to a short break. We'll tell you more about a security issue at Windsor Castle next.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So it's turning colder for many of us as we go through this week, with some sleet and snow in the forecast for some of us and plenty of blustery showers across parts of Scotland. These will continue throughout this morning, perhaps leading to some icy stretches through the morning rush hour. But further south, definitely a milder start to the day, plenty of cloud and outbreaks of showery rain around, these perhaps turning heavy across southwestern parts of England. For Northern Ireland, though, a damp end to the day, plenty of rain falling to lower levels, but perhaps some sleet and snow over the hills as we go through the afternoon. And it will be a chilly feeling day for much of northern parts of the UK, only 3 or 4 degrees in places, but just holding on to that slightly milder air further south as we see that rain pushing its way eastwards through the latter half of the day and in towards the evening. This could again turn heavy in places, particularly over any high ground across southwestern parts of England, parts of Wales as well, and generally just a cloudy and damp end to the day for many places. That rain across Northern Ireland, again falling as rain to lower levels, but perhaps some sleet and snow continuing over any high ground. And for much of Scotland, quite a cloudy end to the day. Those snow showers continuing to pile in across the north and the east through Monday evening. As we then go through the rest of Monday, that area of rain pushes its way eastwards, perhaps causing some disruptive sleet and snow across parts of northern England. It will mostly be falling as rain to lower levels, but we could perhaps see up to 20 centimetres of snow across the Pennines by the time we get to Tuesday morning. So do take care if you are travelling during the morning and keep up to date with the latest warnings on that. Further south, there could be some heavy showers and perhaps not quite as mild as it has been recently under all that cloud and rain. A chilly start for much of Scotland and Northern Ireland on Tuesday morning. Again, we could see some ice in places, and there could just be some sleet and snow lingering along some eastern coast through Tuesday afternoon. But for many of us, it will be a drier and brighter end to the day with plenty of sunny spells around, but with northerly winds, it will definitely be feeling colder than we've seen recently. Only 7 or 8 degrees in the south and perhaps only 3 or 4 degrees further north.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 11 a.m. on Monday, the 18th of November. We are live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and me, Ellie Costello, in for Bev Turner.
What a joy. Royal security scare. Masked burglars broke into Windsor Castle grounds. Prince William, Princess Catherine and their children were asleep inside. The investigation continues a month later. Cameron Walker has more.
With a decision to take away armed police from two of the security gates here at Windsor Castle, this latest incident has raised questions about what measures are in place to keep members of the royal family safe.
Sir Keir Starmer is off on his travels, the 15th time since being elected. This time he's at the G20 summit in Brazil. More on that to come.
Those photographs were posed. Biden backing the Ukraine. Joe Biden has given the green light for the Ukraine to use American long-range missiles inside Russia. Some say we're on the brink of World War III. Will Britain follow suit?
Furious farmers are going to protest in Westminster tomorrow after the inheritance tax raid. Here's what Sir Keir Starmer had to say about his budget at the Welsh Labour conference at the weekend.
So make no mistake, I will defend our decisions in the budget all day long.
And then he left by the back door and didn't talk to the farmers. Now, junior doctors are favouring lucrative locum salaries as they ditch the NHS, and they're posting about their good fortune on TikTok. Take a listen.
We're just over a month into FY1 and I'm picking up my first locum shift, baby! The hourly rate that I am getting is so vastly different to the normal hourly rate. It is crazy.
Very interested in getting the details from Cameron Walker there in Windsor about that burglary in October that we're only just hearing about, but it was very close to Adelaide Cottage, which is, of course, where the Prince and Princess of Wales, yes, and the children all live. I think that's quite concerning.
And things they've gone in, they've nicked a quad bike and some farm equipment. But what if they thought, oh, this is the royal estate, let's have a wander round. They could have gone further. You don't know how far away the police officers were, because there are protection officers, but of course it is a vast estate. It was a gate which the royals used, which you would have thought would be alarmed.
And you
climbed over it.
Yeah, and you would think, in this case, it was burglars,
yes.
Yeah. But if that was someone with malicious intent, if that was a terrorist, could they also gain access?
Because there must be
that gate?
I imagine it's CCTV, the length and breadth.
Well, you'd imagine so.
I remember a couple of years ago, as you pointed out, just in the grounds, was it Windsor Castle?
2021, Christmas Day.
Yeah, with a
crossbow.
Yeah, amazing.
A crossbow incident. So have lessons not been learned from that? We're going to get all the details from Cameron Walker, who's live for us at Windsor Castle. But before we get into any of that, let's go through the headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Ellie, thank you very much. The top stories from the GB Newsroom. Whilst Sir Keir Starmer says we need to double down on support for Ukraine, as President Joe Biden has given the green light to Kyiv to use US-supplied long-range missiles to strike inside Russia. The Prime Minister says Ukraine is top of his agenda at the G20 summit of world leaders and told reporters there's got to be full support as long as it takes. President Vladimir Putin has warned the West they would be playing with fire if they allowed Ukrainian forces to launch Western-supplied cruise and ballistic missiles at Russia, saying it could even trigger a global conflict. It seems a move by North Korea to send thousands of its troops to fight with Russia has changed US calculations and forced Joe Biden into making this decision. Shadow Secretary of State for Defence James Cartledge says the move is justified.
Russia invaded Ukraine, a wholly unprovoked, illegal invasion, a dictatorship invading a democracy. So it's been the right thing to do to not be directly involved in Ukraine, but to support them in whatever we can in terms of providing munitions. That's helped Ukraine to check their advance. But there's been a major development. We talk about escalation. Imagine how the Russians would feel if 10,000 NATO troops were now in Ukraine supporting them. The fact is 10,000 North Korean troops have been deployed into this battle. We understand from the US State Department they've been injected directly into the fight with Russia. That is a major strategic development, and I think in those circumstances this decision is justified.
Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson told GB News the government are committed to helping the Ukrainian people.
We stand steadfast behind the Ukrainian people, behind the Ukrainian government. That was the case under the last Conservative government, and there was cross-party support in the face of Russian aggression for the Ukrainian people. We continue to maintain that position, and as we enter almost the 1,000th day of the conflict, I think it really brings into sharp focus the sacrifices of the Ukrainian people. And the Prime Minister and the Defence Secretary, from our point of view, will always continue to keep under review what is necessary by way of military aid for the Ukrainian people.
Sir Keir Starmer says he intends to pursue a pragmatic relationship with China when he meets President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit, as world leaders meet in Brazil. The Prime Minister said the size of China's economy and its membership of the UN Security Council meant he wanted to have serious and pragmatic discussions with the Chinese leader during his time in Rio de Janeiro. Sir Keir Starmer is set to meet the President of China in a bid to defrost relations with Beijing. It's the first time a British Premier has met him since 2018. Well, speaking to reporters on a plane bound for Brazil, Sir Keir said that the UK and China were both global players, global powers, both permanent members of the Security Council and of the G20. The Metropolitan Police says 2 police constables have been charged with sexual assault. 41-year-old Jerome Beasley and 39-year-old Luke Robinson have each been charged with 4 counts of sexual assault against a woman in central London in April whilst off duty. They're set to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on Wednesday and are both currently suspended from duty. Sir Keir Starmer says he's absolutely confident that the vast majority of farms and farmers will not be affected by changes to inheritance tax announced in the budget. The row over the taxes for farms worth more than £1 million continues as the Prime Minister said last night that the money the government has put into this sector is not to be overlooked. A protest is expected in Westminster tomorrow as farmers rally on Whitehall against the changes announced in last month's budget, while separately the National Farmers Union will hold a mass lobby of MPs in their efforts to get the government to rethink. Yesterday, the head of the Farming Union said that farmers are feeling betrayed about the changes to inheritance tax. Burglars raided the Windsor Castle estate while the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children reportedly slept nearby. The King and Queen were not in the residence. The Sun reported that 2 men are said to have climbed a 6-foot fence at night and stole farm vehicles during the raid last month. They used a stolen truck to break through a gate said to be the nearest exit for the Prince and Princess and their children before targeting Shaw Farm, a working farm inside the estate. The pair remain at large. Elsewhere, domestic energy prices are expected to go up again in the new year, according to consultancy Cornwall Insight. A household using a typical amount of gas and electricity will pay £1,736 a year from January, according to the forecaster. That would be a £17 a year rise, or a 1% increase compared with the current typical annual bill of £1,717, with prices forecast to stay high for the rest of winter. And the Met Office says the UK is braced for disruptive snow, ice and cold temperatures over the coming days. Up to 20 centimetres of snow may accumulate in the worst affected areas in the country's first taste of winter, according to the forecaster. The Met Office has issued several yellow weather warnings for snow and ice for parts of the UK. That began yesterday afternoon and are in place until tomorrow morning, but said there is potential for warnings to be escalated. Today, a warning comes into force at 7 p.m. and is in place until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, covering areas in the East Midlands, Yorkshire, Wales and the north of England overnight. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More news in half an hour.
Thanks, Tatiana. Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. We are live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and me, Ellie Costello, in for Bev Turner today. Loads of you emailing in. Thank you so much for your views. Neil says, we've been talking about young people driving, especially under the age of 21. Neil says, you should be restricted on driving until you're 21 or 3 years driving experience, whichever comes later. By these restrictions, he means speed-limited vehicles, only up to 60 miles per hour, no motorway driving, and a further test if you want to use motorways. Something like that would be a progression, he says.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can see when I paid for my driving instructor, I mean, that was expensive. But
extortionate,
I just felt so scared about going on a motor on my own. And I just thought, he'll have to teach me, and he did.
Well, I very much feel like I learnt how to drive when I passed my test, which is a terrifying thought, isn't it? So it doesn't actually teach you how to drive, it teaches you how to pass your test.
Which is a whole question we could have about exams and O-levels and GCSEs and A-levels. Do they teach you properly just to get through exams? And a lot of people are talking about the Rwanda scheme. Ray says Trump should pursue the Rwanda scheme if only to show how wrong, incompetent and stupid this government is. The public that protests and didn't bother to vote are to blame for this country's mess. My vote went and will carry on to be for reform and counted as a reform vote. By the way, Reform did not agree with the Rwanda policy. They thought it was gimmicky. But I still would make the point that this Labour government should have at least tried it. It was there, ready and waiting. The planes could have gone off.
Flights booked for the end of July.
Flights for the end of July. OK, the European Court of Human Rights could have said, you can't go. They could have said to the European Court of Human Rights, thanks, we're sending the plane anyway. It might have acted as a deterrent, and I think Labour wouldn't do it because they were frightened it might work.
And then it would be a Tory success.
Another herogram for Ellie. Josh says, love Bev.
Yeah.
Love Andrew. Love Ellie the most.
Well, thank you, Josh. Well, it's lovely to be here with you. I was meant to be in a Pilates class, but I'd rather be with you.
No competition.
No
we can do
competition
Pilates afterwards if you like.
No. Oh, yeah, do that. No, you wouldn't like that at all. You'd rather go for a cup of tea somewhere, I think. But I do think on the Trump issue, it will be really interesting to see what happens, because you know he's promised to deport all
20 million
illegal migrants.
Yeah. Good luck.
There'll be lots of eyes here and elsewhere in Europe thinking, well, let's see how you do that and see if they can make
Well, he's also said he'll use the arm if he has to.
He has said that,
Yeah, well, I've mentioned it before and I get shouted down.
OK. Well, let us know what you think on any of those. gbnews.com/your say. Now, this is something that's going to get you talking as well, because thousands of farmers across the country are set to descend on London tomorrow in protest against the government's budget tax changes, namely inheritance tax for farmers.
The threshold is being raised just £1 million. After that, you pay tax. Labour keeps saying it's important to support their farmers, and they've put £5 billion in the budget for the next 2 years into farming. But as somebody pointing out earlier, one of our guests, that's all about conservation and environment. It's not actually putting money
protecting habitats.
Exactly.
All of that
exactly.
Sort of
about rewilding, which often means that farmers have to plant trees and wildflowers, which land might have been for crops, i.e. feeding us.
Well, here's what Sir Keir Starmer had to say about his budget at the Welsh Labour conference this weekend.
So make no mistake, I will defend our decisions in the budget all day long.
All day long.
Down. Yeah.
All day long, he said. I defend it all day long. And what did he do? He left the Labour Party conference in Wales by the back door because farmers were out the front protesting. Pathetic, pitiful and gutless.
Well, he says that he would defend it. He's doubling down on it, but then he doesn't want to actually face the farmers, and he's not going to face the farmers tomorrow at this protest because he's in Brazil at the G20. Well, let's speak now to National Farmers Union student and young farming ambassador Zoe Legg. Good to see you this morning, Zoe. And how do you feel when you listen to the likes of Sir Keir Starmer there doubling down on his budget, saying that he's going to defend it here, there and everywhere? How are you feeling?
I think it can be summed up in one word, which is just total betrayal. As you said, I'm a young farmer. Farming is hopefully, or I was planning on it being my future. And having seen him at the NFU conference in 2023 saying that he would support farmers and all of this type of thing, to then have had this massive U-turn on something as large as inheriting basically the assets for me to be able to continue my future, to have that effectively pulled from beneath our feet is just an absolutely huge betrayal. And I think that's what the whole farming industry is feeling at the moment.
Tell us about you, Zoe. You're a young farming ambassador. Are you working on a family farm? Are you what is your day? What is it about?
So at the moment, I'm actually at an agricultural university called Harper Adams in my final year, studying to then hopefully go home and to run the family farm, which my mum and I sort of manage at the moment, and looking into diversifying. Up until a few weeks ago, I was incredibly excited about the potential and my future and all of the things that I was looking to do in terms of investing into the future of farming. But that sort of is now completely up in the air, and we are thinking and considering different options about the future of it.
So what does this mean for your family then? I mean, as you say, you're talking as though everything's now suspended, it's all up in the air for you. Could you have to look at a different career choice? Would you have to sell your family farm, do you think?
It is. It's a consideration. So what Rachel Reeves and the government have been saying is that there's loopholes with it in terms of whether you're a couple and how you inherit it. Well, sadly, my father passed away in 2019, so it is only my mum who sort of owns the farm as it was passed to her in his will. So therefore, looking at passing on the farm in terms of the size of it, it is only a small family farm, so 250 acres, but due to our location, the land is valuable, and so therefore, if I did want to take it on in the sort of the passing of my mother in future generations, there would be the likelihood that just to be able to pay that inheritance tax, at least some elements of the farm would have to be sold, which, considering I am trying to continue the legacy of my late father, would be incredibly emotionally upsetting and also disappointing, having spent the last 5 years of my life investing in a career down the farming route at university, to then potentially have to reconsider that is really quite uncertain at the moment. And for me personally, you know, a final year of any dissertation and things is difficult. And now having this, it sort of serves as a bit of a disincentive. Not that I am sort of looking at that, but it makes things a little bit harder emotionally at the moment. You know, there's a lot of turbulence going on, and I think a lot of farmers are feeling that. I work with the FCN, which who deal with sort of mental health in farming, and there has been a lot of uncertainty around it, which has affected farmers across the country's mental health. And that's another really big issue that I think the whole industry is now going to have to tackle.
And Zoe, how long has the farm been in your family?
So my dad was a fourth generation tenant farmer who worked incredibly hard to then purchase the farm that we own. So it is only the first generation of owning it. However, we are a family of farmers. We have farmed all as far as I grew up on it. Do you know what I mean? It was all I've ever known. So we are intertwined with the community, and everything that we do has always been about the farm.
And so it's so moving hearing that very human side of all of this, and away from the finances. I mean, this is in your blood, isn't it? This is part of carrying on your father's legacy. This is a vocation for you.
Yes, yeah, it is. I mean, it comes down to the saying that farming is a way of life. And I completely agree that anybody who owns a business or works or invests their time in anything, they are emotionally attached to it. But farming is very unique in the element that it is 24 hours a day, 24/7. You live and breathe your livelihood. And we don't make a lot of money as much. There are, like in any industry, there are people who make significant amounts of money, but the majority, they just get by. And we are one of those farms. We don't necessarily farm for the profits or for the money. We farm because it's what we've grown up with and what we love doing. I mean, would anyone really want to spend Christmas Day, for example, traipsing around in a load of mud feeding cows? Well, if you had just said yes to be paid, then that's ridiculous. But actually, it's because we love those cows. We love the animals that we spend the time with. We enjoy the seasons, going outside and all of that type of thing. It's more than just a way of paying the bills.
Well, best of luck, Zoe. Will you be joining? Will any of your family be at the protest tomorrow?
Yes, I am. I'm heading to London tomorrow, so I will be taking my my British food to the food bank because, again, farmers, we are passionate about producing British food, and so if we can help those struggling to afford food at the moment, that's another positive for this protest. So I will be taking along my British produce, and I will be there in every capacity.
Well, we'll be there. GB News will be there, Zoe, so we'll be looking out for you. Zoe Legg, thank you so much for joining us, a young farming ambassador. What a great ambassador she is for the cause.
What a great ambassador she is. And actually so moving, hearing that human side to why she wants
Four
to...
generation,
Four
Dad's buys it. They've lost Dad, but Mum and daughter are determined to keep it going. And then the Labour government intervene. And
it's all up in the air now. Yeah, very moving hearing from Zoe there. Let us know what you think about that. gbnews.com/your say. What do you think about this as well? This is our poll of the day. Do you think Donald Trump is right to adopt Britain's ditched Rwanda plan?
We'll be bringing you the live results throughout the day, so make sure to stay tuned. The final result will be announced, as ever, later in the very fine Martin Daubney show.
Yes, and so if you're watching on the television, you can use the QR code that we've just actually lost off the screen, but we'll get it back for you. You can use that QR code, or you can go online if you're listening on the radio, gbnews.com/poll.
Up next, the doctor will see you now. Well, only if they're on a locum shift, it seems. Find out more in just a tick. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss my big opinion. Mark Meets and my take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Osama bin Laden issued a fatwa entitled World Front for Combat Against Jews and Crusaders, and President George W. Bush talked of a crusade on terrorism. In 2010, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula sent a parcel bomb to New York. It was addressed to Reginald of Chatillon. The addressee had died at the hands of Saladin in 1187. Those facts suggest that the long history of struggle between Christendom and Islamic caliphates remains relevant, at least to some militant Islamists. That being the case, perhaps we should all understand the past. General Sir Simon Mayle, a former Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff Operations, can be our teacher, particularly if we want to know in gory detail about battles to control Jerusalem, Constantinople, Vienna and the Eastern Mediterranean. His new book is called The House of War. It's an excellent read, which perhaps ought to figure in a national adult curriculum. And he joins me. But let's begin with the word crusade. What was it that drove Christians around Europe to want to cross to the Holy Land and seize Jerusalem?
Context and timing is really important to understand. It's been rather stereotyped as Christian aggression against peace-loving Muslims. The Islamic religion had burst out of the desert in the 7th century with the death of the Prophet Muhammad, and for the next nearly 400 years had Christianity, Christendom, the Christian states absolutely on the back foot. It took the Holy Land, destroyed the Persian Empire, took the North Africa, which was Christian at the time, including Egypt, of course, took Spain all the way into Tours, Charles Martel. 100 years after the death of the Prophet, it expanded in an extraordinary state.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. We're going through the stories of the day now with former Labour advisor Matthew Torbett and the Director of Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood. Morning, you two.
Morning.
Can we talk about junior doctors ditching NHS jobs in favour of locum salaries? It's on the Mail Online today, Mark.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't blame them, really, can you? I was looking at some of the numbers. If you switch
they're
off
lucrative, aren't
it's
they?
lucrative. If the NHS is going to offer you, what is it, between 25 and 60 quid an hour as a locum, rather than around 13, 14 pounds an hour if you're, on a PAYE deal, you'd expect them to do that. But, I mean, it just speaks to the NHS being completely broken, doesn't it? And we've got to start in the public sector, not just the National Health Service, railways, everywhere else, doing what comes naturally to us in the private sector, that by and large, your pay hike is associated to improvements in productivity. So as and when the NHS starts to produce, many more operations, look at the fantastic health data, as the trains start to run faster and more reliably, well, then I might be up for giving these people pay rises. That's how it works in the private sector. If your company is doing well and you're a part of it and it's performing well, your salary goes up. I must admit, I don't often have a great deal of sympathy with the junior doctors. They're gaming this system well. I remember back in the day when they were going on strike and sort of threatening to move to Australia. And my solution was, well, rather than you guys all moving out to Australia, why don't we just import the Australian healthcare system to the United Kingdom, if that's the system?
And what would that involve?
That much more private insurance-based. Yeah. So everybody gets worried in Britain that the poor won't get health treatment. Actually, every other Western European country has universal coverage. That's what people really like about the NHS and worry about the American system. But it's competitive. Health is important, but food is important. And we have competitive supermarkets. We don't have the Ministry for Food doling out what we're going to eat each day. And we're going to have to, at some point, move the NHS in this direction. I had high hopes for Wes Streeting here, actually. He did seem to be talking about completely transforming our approach to the NHS, but so far, it just seems to be shoveling more money into it, and I'm afraid that goes down a black hole.
Matthew, what do you think?
I think the Ministry of Food would be a good thing. We have record levels of child poverty and 6 million children, not eating, going to school. So I think that would be a great thing, actually, Mike. That's a good idea.
Well, it's welfare that solves that, not having the minister running Asda.
No, not necessarily, but I think that, Ian Byrne has run a fantastic campaign for many years now on the right to food, and the fact that we, as the sixth richest economy in the world, nobody should be going hungry at all in this. I think I would agree with Mark's initial comments in the fact that I don't blame them either. Why would you want to work longer for less money? And I think it speaks slightly to a society that we're living in and the social contract being broken and people feeling it's broken, in that people are feeling overworked and underpaid. And I think there is a threat of people going to Australia. Even anecdotally, I know people going to Australia, Dubai, Canada.
One less drastic solution, because I can't see any Labour government introducing an Australian insurance scheme. But you say to doctors who's been paid, they've been trained at vast public expense for 7 years. You've got to do at least 3 years in the NHS, or if you do clear off to Australia, I'm terribly sorry, you're going to have to repay what it costs to train you.
I think that's
exactly right. We've got to get some back from them.
It should be on a grade. So if you want to take the British training and immediately head off to Sydney, you've got to pay back the whole lot. If you do 3 years, maybe you pay back half. If you do 15 years, maybe you pay back zero. So the training system that's putting people into the healthcare system in Britain isn't working at all. All of the wrong incentives. Colour me unsurprised. I mean, I really hoped that Labour would fix this, because it seems to me easier for Labour to be radical on the NHS than the Conservatives, who are much less trusted on it. But so far, I'm afraid we're going to keep having a healthcare system which, compares appallingly with the rest of the Western world, really.
But root and branch reform will take time, won't it?
It does, and this is the unpopular message, because people don't want to do that. People are impatient, and I understand why. They're feeling very burnt after 14 years and feeling worse off than ever. I think the main message of this is, this locum system, we're all paying for this. This is the NHS paying ridiculous amounts of money to get short-term fixes. And I think, these agencies paying a premium. We need to address issues of pay, which appears to have been done with the junior doctors, I would hope, and that will hopefully be the end of it. If it isn't, we need to look at other ways of doing this. We need to look at workload. Because I think people are too stretched within the NHS, and that might speak to a wider root and branch reform, and the working conditions of people in these hospitals. A lot of these hospitals we have in this country were built in the 1940s and aren't really fit for purpose in a lot of ways. So until we see that, I don't think the trend is going to reverse itself with regards to the locum system.
Matthew, let's stay with you, shall we, and talk about Biden giving Zelensky the green light to use long-range missiles inside Russia.
It just feels a little bit too little too late, to be perfectly honest with you. I think he's making this decision now almost whether it's to tie President Trump's hand or make it... Yeah, it makes it anything... If Trump goes, well, we're not doing that anymore, it becomes an unpopular decision and that we should be helping our allies in Ukraine against, you know, evil Russia and whatever else. Is it going to turn the tide of the war? Probably not. Is it more political gamemanship? Quite possibly. I think the more interesting thing on this is that we will likely follow suit. Whatever the Americans do, we tend to follow. We're the tail on the dog as such. I thought it was interesting when Boris was on with Patrick Christie's last week, actually, of what will come next with regards to ending the war. He seemed to suggest, and this is somebody that has, you know, clearly an interest in Ukraine and probably a good personal relationship with Zelensky, in that he thinks a deal could be done with regards to Ukraine giving up some of the land in return for NATO membership. I thought it was interesting that's even on the table, because I can't imagine Vladimir Putin agreeing to that whatsoever with regards to NATO membership. But both sides are losing people and men, and it's not good for anyone's economy. So I think that the more interesting bit will be what follows. This is, you know...
So would you have preferred Biden to have done this far sooner?
I think so. I think, well, Zelensky has been asking this for some time.
Yeah.
I think it's dangerous in the sense of it opens up Putin's argument of, well, if you're using your weapons, that is NATO declaring war on us, and therefore maybe we will declare war back on NATO. And I really don't fancy living in a world where that's happening.
But that's understatement of the year if that's what he does do, because that is nuclear.
No, quite, exactly. So I think if you're going to do it, this has been asked for a long time, and we could have got to a point where this wasn't even happening, to be perfectly honest.
What do you think, Mark?
Well, at some point we're going to have to come to a solution here, and it's going to be a suboptimal one, right? So in my wildest dreams, Crimea goes back to the Ukraine, all of the territory goes back to the Ukraine, and the Russians say, I'm terribly sorry, and Vladimir Putin is replaced by somebody rather more palatable, right? That's my number one outcome. We're not going to get absolutely...
Nice.
We're going to get nowhere close to that.
Yeah.
So I think after all of this loss of life, we've now got to work out where we draw a line. And clearly Crimea will stay Russian, some of the territory will go Russian. Now, whether that's associated with NATO membership or some sort of associate membership, how much you hold Putin's feet to the fire to say any breach of whatever peace accord we've got, we'll treat, 1,000,000% seriously. But Trump said he could solve this in 24 hours.
Yeah.
So, I'll give him 48. Let's see how much of a man of his word he is.
Do you think he's furious with Biden for doing this?
Yeah, this seems to me, I agree with Matthew, this seems to me spectacularly unhelpful. I'm not a military strategist, but if you believe this was the way to, change the outcome of the war, should have been done long ago.
Yeah.
And it seems to me it's clearly been done to skew the president-elect. And if we do tend to follow America, I agree with you, we do tend to, well, that's going to force a U-turn in British military approach here. We're going to follow Biden, knowing that in a few weeks' time we're going to have to follow Trump. Same might happen with the Chagos Islands, by the way. You wonder whether actually our foreign policy is entirely set by the Democrats and the Republicans, rather than by the Labour government.
I'd rather that than set by David.
Yeah, maybe a blessing in disguise. David Lammy.
Thank you, David Lammy.
Yeah.
Anything but him.
Mark, we're out of time with you, I'm afraid, but thank you very much indeed for your time this
boys.
morning. Good to see you both. Time now for your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Ellie, thank you very much. The top stories this hour. Sir Keir Starmer says we need to double down on support for Ukraine as President Joe Biden has given the green light to Kyiv to use US-supplied long-range missiles to strike inside Russia. The Prime Minister says Ukraine is top of his agenda at the G20 summit of world leaders and told reporters there's got to be full support as long as it takes. President Vladimir Putin has warned the West they would be playing with fire if they allowed Ukrainian forces to launch Western-supplied cruise and ballistic missiles at Russia, saying it could even trigger a global conflict. It seems a move by North Korea to send thousands of its troops to fight with Russia has changed US calculations and forced Joe Biden into making this decision. Shadow Secretary of State for Defence James Cartledge says the move is justified.
Russia invaded Ukraine, wholly unprovoked, illegal invasion, a dictatorship invading a democracy. So it's been the right thing to do to not be directly involved in Ukraine, but to support them in whatever way we can in terms of providing munitions. That's helped Ukraine to check their advance. But there's been a major development. We talk about escalation. Imagine how the Russians would feel if 10,000 NATO troops were now in Ukraine supporting them. The fact is 10,000 North Korean troops have been deployed into this battle. We understand from the US State Department they've been injected directly into the fight with Russia. That is a major strategic development, and I think in those circumstances this decision is justified.
Sir Keir Starmer says he intends to pursue a pragmatic relationship with China when he meets President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit as world leaders meet in Brazil. The Prime Minister said the size of China's economy and its membership of the UN Security Council meant he wanted to have serious and pragmatic discussions with the Chinese leader during his time in Rio de Janeiro. Sir Keir Starmer is set to meet with the President of China in a bid to defrost relations with Beijing. It's the first time a British Premier has met him since 2018. And finally, in sport, Tottenham midfielder Rodrigo Bentancur has been given a 7-match ban and fined £100,000 for an alleged racist remark that he made about his South Korean teammate Song Heung-min during a television interview. The Uruguayan was charged by the FA after the interview, which emerged in June, that showed him being asked by a television host to show the shirt of a Spurs player. Well, he replied, "Sonny's, it could be Sonny's cousin too, as they all look the same." Well, he apologised on Instagram, saying it was a very bad joke. Bentancur will miss Tottenham's next 7 domestic fixtures. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More news from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
They're here. Tom and Miriam, what have you got coming up?
Good morning. Well, we are going to be looking at this rise in youth worklessness. So Liz Kendall, the Department for Work and Pensions, has said that councils should be seeking out young people who aren't working because of mental ill health. So we've got a guest to come on from the Centre for Social Justice to talk about this. What can the government actually do? Because it's clearly a problem. Lots of young people not even starting work
But
for whatever reason.
Do they really have a problem?
Well, there's certainly a self-declared mental health problem. That is the reason for the rise in worklessness, but that's exactly what we'll be digging into.
Arching.
But
Eyebrows arching. Sorry, eyebrows arching.
With mental health, it's always a spectrum, right? There are some people who really genuinely suffer from some of the most obscene sort of mental health difficulty and can't leave the bed. Then there are some people who have mental health difficulties, but actually one of the best things for them could be regular routine, getting out of bed in the morning, going to work, getting outside, touching some grass, all the rest of it.
Great.
And so the question is, are we actually making people worse off by removing that sense of routine, by having an easy button to press saying, actually, I don't have to do anything today, I'll just get my free money from the government and sit there and do nothing? Is that going to help them, or is that going to turn them into the worst sort of spiral?
But this government and the previous government both agree that these young people should be in work. It is the best thing for them. So the question is, the last government tried to do something about it, failed. What are they actually going to do? Well, the question is, should benefits be withdrawn? How should people be declared sick? That is what we're going to be looking at
Waive
today.
the benefits, stick over them, I think you might get a better response.
And of course, as Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride did try to do some of this stuff, then the election came, that early election that we learnt over the weekend. Everyone was telling Rishi Sunak, don't do the early election. And then we had the early election and all of this legislation fell by the wayside in a process known as wash-up. So the question is, will it now be picked up? Perhaps not, perhaps.
It must have been very painful for you, Miriam, to read all that stuff about the early election, because it didn't help your seat, did it?
Well, it didn't, but I do question whether the result would have been substantially different had we waited until now.
Oh, there would have been one difference. It wouldn't have happened over D-Day. And that could have saved at least a couple of
seats. But it would have happened at the same time as the American election, so that would have been very interesting.
I'd have done it the week after the American election, which would have helped.
Well, he had until January. We might have even had it by now.
We could have had a Christmas campaign, God forbid.
Yeah. But had the planes still not left for Rwanda, which was a very high likelihood, I think it could have even got worse.
Yeah, possibly.
There you go.
Although, if there was a US election, Mr Nigel Farage might have been the other side of the Atlantic.
Indeed, he would have been out of the way. That would definitely have helped.
Very good. Most important.
Thanks, you two. All of that and more coming up at midday. Up next, a royal security breach in Windsor. Find out more in just a moment. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office on what is going to be a fairly cold and perhaps wintry day for some of us. We do have some sunny weather around across northern parts today, and with that we have some cold air here. Further south and west, it's a milder story, but also quite a cloudier and wetter story. And as the wet weather across the south and west hits the colder air, we are going to see something wintry later on. But for the time being, through this afternoon, lots of sunny skies across northern and eastern UK. Across the far north of Scotland, some wintry showers, some sleet or snow piling its way in. A cloudier story towards the south and west with quite a bit of rain around, but it is milder here. Temperatures for some peaking around 13 or 14 Celsius, only a few degrees above freezing towards the north and east. Now, as we head into this evening, there are a few things to watch out for. Across the north of Scotland, we will continue to see some wintry showers. These could become more of a thing overnight, so some hazards associated with these. A drier end to the day across southern Scotland and the far northeast of England, but we have that wet weather coming in from the southwest. That's going to bring some snow across parts of Northern Ireland and also across parts of northern England as we go through the end of today and overnight. It is likely to be quite disruptive for some places. We're talking potentially 20 centimetres above 200 to 300 metres, so some cities, Leeds, Sheffield, could see some disruptive snow overnight. Further south, there will be some wet weather around, but it's staying milder here, so I'm expecting it really just to be rain, with temperatures for some staying above 10 Celsius, but in the north with some clear skies, a harsh frost, -8 perhaps. As we go through tomorrow, we are going to see a lot of the wet and wintry weather clearing away towards the east, so turning drier for many of us, but some rain continuing towards the southwest and further sleet and snow showers piling into northern Scotland. Temperatures will actually be dropping a little bit as we go through the day, so it is going to feel pretty chilly for many of us, despite there being some sunshine around. Bye-bye.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Eddie Costello, who's in for Beverly Turner.
Yes, and we've been talking about the farmers' protest tomorrow in Westminster. And we were speaking to a young farmer a little bit earlier on, Zoe Legg, who's
She's an ambassador, isn't she?
A young
last
farming
year of her
ambassador.
degree.
Yep, last year of her degree. She was just incredible, wasn't she? And it seems that you all agree. Trevor's been in touch on Instagram saying that young farmer was such an inspiration, very knowledgeable and articulate. What a credit to her family.
They should put her in front of the Environment Secretary, who is a man called Steve Reed.
Steve Reed.
Whose great rural experience is predicated on the fact he was born and brought up in Lambeth in South London, where he ran the local council. So he obviously knows a lot about the countryside and farms and haystacks and things.
Well, there is a sentiment, isn't there, amongst farmers that Labour just do not understand farming, do not understand the agricultural sector.
They've got it in their head.
And lots of them have got
it's all landed
constituencies.
gentry.
Yes.
That's what they've got it in the view that the gentleman farmer, if we could still call them a gentleman farmer. Yeah, of course, some very rich people have bought agricultural land because they got around the inheritance rules, but this is just killing potentially hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of family-owned farms, like lovely Zoe's farm, been in the family 4 generations.
And like she was saying, they're not cash rich. They've got assets. But even assets don't go too far. I mean, the £1 million threshold at the moment sounds like a lot of money. But as she was pointing out, by the time you take in land and a farmhouse, it's a small farm, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
But despite all of that, the Treasury is saying only 28% of farms are going to be affected by
Well, that's
this.
a third, and that's too many.
Well, that is up for contention as well. The National
is.
Farmers Union would say it's much more than that.
Yeah, it's funny because Labour are normally completely in lockstep with the trade unions, but it appears not the National Farmers Union.
Not with the farmers, no. Well, let us know what you think.
yeah.
GBNews.com/yourself.
Moving on, masked men raided crossed into the Windsor Castle farm while Prince William, Princess Catherine and their children were asleep nearby.
Yes, Thames Valley Police confirmed a burglary at the property on the Crown Estate back in October, but we're only just hearing about it now. GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker is at Windsor Castle for us. What do we understand happened, Cameron?
Yeah, well, Ellie, this potentially is a very serious security breach. We know that two masked men, even, according to the Sun newspaper, scaled a 6-foot wall, a perimeter wall here at Windsor, relatively close to Adelaide Cottage, which is where Prince William, Princess Catherine and their 3 young children were, it's thought, sleeping at the time, Adelaide Cottage. And they entered the perimeter, and then their target, as according to the Sun, was Shaw Farm, which is a working farm within the guarded Windsor perimeter. They then stole a quad bike and a pickup truck and then smashed through Shaw Farm Gate, which is one of the perimeter gates here at Windsor Castle. It is the closest to Adelaide Cottage, where the Prince and Princess of Wales live and regularly use to get out of the estate. And that gate was so badly damaged that it had to be replaced. Now, the issue is, what the Sun on Sunday revealed this weekend is that armed police, both at Shaw Farm Gate here and at King Henry VIII Gate, which is the one that you see behind me, they report that armed police, the constant presence of armed police has been taken away. But this morning, when we arrived, there were no armed police on this gate. In the last 15 minutes or so, armed police have now actually arrived. Now, I have contacted Thames Valley Police as to ask exactly why, because the reason being why it's so important is that this is the latest in a number of incidents that have happened at Windsor Castle over the last couple of years. In February, an unarmed man was arrested very close to the King's apartments here at Windsor Castle for trespass. He was then subsequently sectioned under the Mental Health Acts. And then back in December 2021, an armed man with a crossbow scaled the perimeter wall and attempted to, as he told the police at the time, kill the Queen, as in Queen Elizabeth II. And he was sentenced for treason at the court around a year later. So this has raised wider questions about the kind of security that there is available inside the Windsor Castle perimeter that protects the royal family. It is understood that armed police do wander the grounds 24/7, and during the changing of the guards here at King Henry VIII Gate, there is always an armed police presence. We have contacted both Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace. They do not comment on security issues. At the time of the incident on the 13th of October, the King and Queen were not in residence.
Cameron Walker there for us at Windsor Castle. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, up next, Donald Trump's son has waded in and accused Joe Biden of trying to start World War III after the president, that's Biden, has pledged to allow long-range missiles to be flown from Ukraine, that's American missiles, deep into the heart of Russia. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home? Talking about? Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
This is a topic very close to my heart. I have become fully convinced that social media, smartphones are one of the primary causes of mental health problems in children and many other serious problems beside. Lots of governments are starting to talk about this, but the Australians are well ahead in their use of legislation. What do you think about this issue?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I've got 3 young children and I'm really concerned about... I mean, they're too young to be on social media, but I'm really concerned about what lies ahead for them. I'm not sure I support what Australia's doing, not because I don't think it's a good idea to ensure that age verification is right. I'm just not sure that the age 16 is appropriate. But that's progress. If we effectively, as I do, accept the point that we need some sort of control, then we can move to a proper debate about whether that's 16, 14, 13, whatever it may be. And of course, there are age restrictions on things like Facebook. I think from memory it is 13.
Yes, but it's a tick box.
But it's a tick box. So all you can do is you can just knock. If you're 11 years old, you can just predate your date of birth by 2 years, and you can get on. I think what Australia is proposing is interesting because it will stop young people, maybe without their parents' knowledge, short-circuiting the system because they're going to be asking for proper age verification and ID. That's definitely something we should do in the UK because it's enforced in the existing law. Query, is 16 the right age, Miriam?
I completely agree with it. It's something I actually said should have been done before. And I think what is good about it is that for a long time, a lot of governments have been saying that the actual social media companies should take more responsibility, but they're not going to because it hurts their bottom line. The most voracious users are younger users. So they will pledge that, oh, I'll put the tick box in, but the kid is the one who's going to actually tick the box. So doing something like this is saying that, OK, we will put in legislation that damages your bottom line, and I think it will force the hand because they've said it's only 12 months and they will reevaluate it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. Now, the President of the United States, Joe Biden, has approved the use of US long-range missiles by Ukraine to strike inside Russia for the first time.
So this means all eyes now turn to our own Prime Minister to see whether he will follow suit and allow British weapons to be used in the same way.
Well, our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, joins us now. Good to see you, Mark. And this is a major policy reversal from the US, isn't it?
Well, it is. It's been a long time coming. There has been a lot of pressure that's come from, actually, the UK and others on the US to try to get them to bend to allow Ukraine to use these longer-range missiles into Russian territory. And the reason they want to do that is not to attack Russian communities as such, but to go after the military bases, the airfields where they're launching drone and jet attacks on Ukraine, the supply depots, all of those kind of fuel depots where they have this sort of the line of supply lines basically into Ukraine to try to do some damage, to try to slow down the Russian advance. But of course, like everything with this conflict, which in a few months' time will be at its third anniversary, we've had frustratingly slow incremental steps from Ukraine's allies, first allowing them to get heavy artillery, then a big debate over whether we should give them tanks that rumbled on for many, many months before we eventually gave them tanks. The same about fast jets. Do we give them fast jets? And all of the while Russia saying this would be a step too far before we eventually gave them fast jets. And now, of course, it's these longer range missiles.
So if Biden's given the go-ahead, how quickly, Mark, can they be up and launched into Russian space?
Well, they've got the missiles already, so it's really the targeting that is up to Ukraine now. They could use them at any point. As we understand it, the US has approved their use in the Kursk region, which, of course, Ukraine has advanced into. But what you've got at the moment are the advance party for some 10,000 North Korean troops that have been brought into Russia and that are going down to the Kursk region and joining in the fight. Now, that's an escalation, if ever there was one.
Lambs to the slaughter.
Yeah. Well, that's an escalation in terms of what the West would see as a real provocation here. And that might be in some part behind the US decision to allow these missiles now to be used against the supply lines of forward operating bases in that Kursk region that would allow Ukraine to be able to hold on to that land in Russia in the Kursk region, because that could well be a significant bargaining chip when we get to the point, which we probably expect to get to fairly quickly under a Trump presidency where both sides are brought around the table and they have to decide how they're carving up the ground that Russia has already taken and what Ukraine can and can't accept.
Well, I was going to ask you, what does this mean for Donald Trump? Because Donald Trump Jr. has come out and said that this is the triggering World War III. I mean, he said he's going to end the war in 24 hours. This surely ties his hands.
Well, I mean, I think when Donald Trump comes into power, I think he will probably have willing participants in terms of both Russia and Ukraine who will be willing to explore at least talks about how to end this, because it's been a huge attritional war on both sides. It's been costly, of course, in lives, but also in money, in all of the infrastructure, especially in Ukraine. But of course, Ukraine doesn't want to leave Russia with significant chunks of its territory, and that will be where the difficulty is, even though, of course, it would suit both sides for this bloody affair to be brought to an end. And Russia as well, because they have lost hundreds of thousands of their personnel, either injured or killed in the last 3 years, along with massive levels of equipment.
OK, Mark White, good to see you.
Fascinating, isn't it?
Indeed. That's it from us. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Been lovely.
Up next is Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Miriam.
See you tomorrow.
We'll be looking at the extraordinary rise in young people who are signed off work sick for mental health reasons. Is there something the government can do about it?
And we'll be live in Rio de Janeiro, where the leaders of the world are meeting ahead of the G20 summit. Keir Starmer may well be meeting with Xi Jinping, the president of China. Just what does that say for the relations between the UK and China? All that to come, of course, after your weather forecast.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So it's turning colder for many of us as we go through this week, with some sleet and snow in the forecast for some of us and plenty of blustery showers across parts of Scotland. These will continue throughout this morning, perhaps leading to some icy stretches through the morning rush hour. But further south, definitely a milder start to the day, plenty of cloud and outbreaks of showery rain around, these perhaps turning heavy across southwestern parts of England. For northern